Are Helen and Kath, oops, I'm not unmuted. Am I unmuted, Courtney? No.
Oh, you're unmuted, yep.
Is Dan here, and are Kathleen and Helen?
The only one we're missing is Helen right now.
Kathleen's here, okay. All right.
So I'm going to leave the board unmuted the whole time. If you guys can just try and stay unmuted, that way I don't have to go back and find you. And then I will unmute everybody else.
Okay.
Oh.
You're taking a chance there, Courtney.
She's calling me, hang on.
Okay.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, Janet, it's Kathleen. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Did you get the box for the lottery thing?
Yes, I did.
Yay, that's gonna be fun, huh?
It's something new.
Looks like an antique.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Is it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's solid oak, big pieces. You will see in a few moments. I'm supposed to open it and show you. And
I saw it in the Selectboard office.
yeah,
I'd never seen it before, so it's,
yeah, we don't use it often. I don't remember since I've been a select person, anybody using it.
well, I'm excited about this lottery.
It's a good, we know if Dan is on.
He is on.
Okay. So wait for Helen. Well, Courtney, should I begin?
Yeah, I mean, if you'd like to, we just have a couple announcements first, and then take care of that.
Yeah, so is Helen having a problem?
She's joining. I just emailed her the link. She couldn't find it.
Okay, all right, so I'll start. So it is, good evening. It is Tuesday, May 26, 2020. It is now 7 p.m. and I will open the Wellfleet Select Board Zoom meeting video conference. We will begin with the usual public comments, open session announcements. Public comments must be brief. The board will not deliberate or vote on any matter raised solely during announcements and public comments. Does anyone on the board have any announcements or comments? Okay. I would like to just announce that it's really important to fill out your census, that they are not necessarily going to be coming door to door with the COVID-19 issue and people, and that you can easily go online. You go into Mass 2020 Census .gov, but even if you just type in Census 2020, it'll come up. It's incredibly easy to do. And it is so important to fill out our census. Without that, that's what our education, roads, everything, every money from the state and the federal government depends upon our census. So please do that. Anyone from the public have an announcement?
Janet, I have a couple.
Okay.
So the first one is that there is still an open position on the Board of Registrars, and those who are interested can email Jennifer Conjal, the town clerk, for more information. The second announcement is that there is information about early voting and voting by mail on the town website located right on the homepage. And then finally, there's two more, sorry. The Recreation Department will be doing a celebratory caravan for Wellfleet's graduating seniors on Friday, June 5th at 11 a.m. And the route will start at the elementary school and go through the center of town. Please line up at the school by 10:45 a.m. that day, June 5th, to participate, and you can contact Becky Rosenberg for more information. And the last announcement is that the Housing Authority and Local Housing Partnership have set up a housing information line, and that number is 508-419-4490, and more information is on the town website and at wellfleetaffordablehousing.org.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well then we will move on to the lottery. So this lottery, you can see behind me that this is the lottery box. This is because we have a grant available, and this is how we determine who gets to lease the grant. This is totally open, and you will see what I'm doing. So I have to legally show you that the box is empty. Can everyone see that the box is empty? You want me to go closer? This is what I didn't want to do. Box is empty.
Janet?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was on the phone with Helen. It looked like Dick Elkin had his hand raised for a announcement.
All right.
Sorry, Helen called and I couldn't do.
That's okay. Better be a good one, Dick.
Well, he's not on anymore, so I guess we'll just, John Wolf has an announcement. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Yes. I just want to let you, I was muted. I just wanted to know if you knew that.
Yeah, I'm muting everybody and I will unmute you once you raise your hand.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I guess continue, Janet. That wasn't an announcement.
Okay. So you can see, I'll stick my hand in, that the box is empty and that there are 9 people. No, there are 8 people for the lottery. And I have to show everybody that here is number 1. Okay, so I'm going to put 8 numbers in. Here's number 1. I fold it, put it in the box. And each of these numbers corresponds to a name of the person who's applied. Here is number 2. Tell me if you can't see these numbers on the video. Number 3. Folding them. 4. 5. 6. 7. And 8. And I don't believe I read the names out beforehand.
No, Janet, because Helen is still having trouble, I have to read that email she sent us and say her piece for her. I don't know why she's having issues getting in.
Oh,
So
all right.
I have it right here.
Oh, you do have it. Good, thank you.
Yep. So, oh, here she comes. Perfect timing. Let me get her connected to audio. Helen, you may say your piece. All Janet did so far was show that she was putting one number into the lottery. She didn't say any names. Nothing has started yet, so you're welcome to say your part.
Yes, and my phone's about to run out and I still haven't gotten this on my computer. So, okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So what has been said already?
Nothing. Janet said it's time for the lottery, and she held up a piece of paper with the number 1 and put it in, number 2, put it in, and so on.
Okay, so here's where we are with this. One of the people who applied, as it turns out, Zach Dixon is already an equal member in a corporation whose business uses a grant and harvest from it. And I sent all of you the language that applies to this before the meeting. I didn't make any comment about it, but that section in our shellfishing regs very specifically states that, you know, the point is that people who don't have any leased area that they have a partnership in, or that they're a member of a corporation of, that people that don't have rights to a lease, which is different than if you're just an employee of leaseholders, people that don't have that access yet get to be in the lottery. And the last paragraph of the section, which I sent to all of you, is very specific about the fact that, I mean, the language was put together by our shellfish constable and our KP law. And this is in 7.2. And it says, no shareholder, officer, director, or other individual holding a similar position, having a different title, but exercising a similar role of a corporation that currently holds an aquaculture license in Wellfleet may apply for such grants. Now, in fact, the names that are on this grant that is up for the lottery are only those of the Dalby brothers. However, the Dalby brothers and Zach Dixon are all equally, you know, important members of a corporation, a business. And in other words, Zach, Mr. Dixon has access to farmed acreage that he harvests from, that he, you know, benefits from, and not just as an employee and not just as a person who's got a corner of it. If he wasn't in the corporation and he was just an employee who had been loaned a section of it, this wouldn't be an issue. But in my mind, having sat through lots of go-round discussions about this on the Shellfish Committee as an audience member and as a member, it's very important to realize that we need to give this opportunity to as many people as possible. So what I'd like to do through you, Janet, is to ask Zach to speak to this. Is Zach present? I have no way of determining this on the equipment right now.
He is present, and I will unmute him.
I'd like to know how Zach wants to, you know, play this. If he's had, first of all, my first question is, Zach, have you had a chance to read the regulation?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I have read the regulation.
So how do you feel about your status in relation to the regulation and the fact that you have a relationship in a corporation with the use of that existing acreage? Not the lottery acreage, but the acreage that you are a part owner of the business that works on it.
Right. So everything that you said, Helen, is true, except for the fact that I do not, nor does the business have any rights to that grant.
However, you do work on it.
Indeed, everything you said was true. I'm in business with Jake and Justin Dalby, and we work on the grant. But if they were to decide to have me not work on the grant, I have no rights there. And the business name is not on the grant, so the business, nor does the business have any rights there.
However, I'm doing devil's advocate here so we can consider it, if I may. However, let's say you were simply a business member of the corporation and weren't harvesting and growing things on the grant equally with the Dalbys. In other words, you were just a backer and your name was in the corporation. That would be something that could exist. In that case, I think for me, it would be a different picture. So what we're looking at here is, should Zach's name be in the lottery pool or not? And I'm just putting out all the thoughts about it. And so I'm going to say thank you and listen to what other people might want to say. And did the rest of the board get a chance to read the regulation?
I did. So Zach, can I ask you, so are you listed on the corporation's papers registration
Yes, I am.
as an owner?
Yes.
Okay. So doesn't that disqualify you?
Well, I'm reading the regulation here,
Mhm.
and it seems to say, what does it say? The last part of the last sentence of 7.2 says, of a corporation that currently holds an aquaculture license in Wellfleet. And this corporation does not hold an aquaculture license.
Yes, but Madam, okay, never mind.
I would like to be fair to myself, and I would like to be fair to all of the other applicants. So when Helen first brought this to my attention, I didn't actually know about that part of the regulation. And like a lot of you, I'm sure, I just assumed that because my name wasn't on a grant that I could be involved in the lottery or try to qualify. Upon closer reading it, I still don't see a reason why I don't qualify. Mostly because I'm really in the same position. I don't have rights to any grants. And I would like to have a right to a grant if I were to win the lottery.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? This is Helen.
Yes.
Zach, so to keep within the spirit of what this regulation is about, which I stated at the beginning, which is to give people a chance who have no access to a formable area in a way in which they can, benefit in a firm business contract commitment in harvesting and profiting from the use of that area, which you do now have. Would you be willing to give up your position on the corporation and simply to stop farming at all on the grant that the Dalby's names are on and that you are in fact equally using? Would you be willing to give that up?
That's something I would consider. I'm not going to make that decision right now, but when you talk about the spirit of it, I believe that I am one of those people. I mean, tomorrow, Jake and Justin could decide that they don't want me on the grant anymore, and that's it.
But you are an equal member of the corporation.
Right.
You don't have,
which has no rights to the grant.
and what, yeah, but it has the rights to the business on the grant, big time.
No, not on the grant.
What is the corporation formed? What is the language of the corporate material? What is the document? What does the document say in terms of what the benefits of being in the corporation are? What is the purpose of the corporation?
Well, it's an oyster business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just about what happens after harvest occurs. Is that right?
Yeah, it doesn't have any language at all about the grant or rights to use the grant or anything like that. Like I said, I want to be fair. If there's a rule in place, I want to adhere to it, first of all, and a regulation, I should say. And I want to be fair to everyone. But, you know, I'm kind of thinking in fairness to, as myself as one of those people, and that I have absolutely no rights to any grant in Wellfleet.
But you have benefits from a grant and you have them contractually in terms of
So
what's
I'm
sold
in
from
the same
it.
boat as someone who is, you know, borrowing a piece of a grant from someone else and then decides they want to get their own when one comes available.
Mhm. Yeah, there are people that have corners of grants that they are allowed to use, and there's no written anything about it, which has always had me scratching my head. But
Right.
you're more than that. You're in business with the two people named to it. Well, in terms of my
I
needing
don't
to
see how, excuse me,
discuss this,
I don't see how I'm more than that.
because you're a member of a business corporation
That-
that benefits, that only uses that acreage.
Right, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that I don't have any more rights than anyone else to any grant.
Okay, so in terms of this needing to be discussed, which is what town council advised, I at least am satisfied, but maybe the rest of the board has some questions. Janet, what do you think? In other words, what we're discussing here is should Zach's name stay in the hat, as it were, his number. And as far as I'm concerned, we've discussed it publicly sufficiently, and a number of things have been discussed in terms of use of existing acreage and Zach's position on it. And I'm satisfied with this discussion. I'd like to hear from other people, but you know.
Is our shellfish constable on? Is Nancy Chavetta here?
Yeah, she is. I'm going to unmute her. Go ahead, Nance.
Hi, here I am.
Have you been listening to the last conversation?
Yes, and you know, to be honest, the way that I read the regs is the way that Zach's reading, which is why I admitted him to, I thought that he met the eligibility criteria. However, when Helen called me today about it, I just, you know, I understand that, you know, the intent of the regulations is to allow, you know, a diversity of people that wouldn't normally have access, a way to try and get their name on a grant, and that this is a pretty, you know, precious and rarely available resource. So I understand that the intent of the regulations was to allow, you know, somebody new that didn't have any type of business interest or capability. And so that's why I called town council, and town council thought that it was important to have a public discussion about it. She agreed that the technically in black and white, it is as Zach is reading it, as I read it in the beginning, but that the board needed to really discuss the intent of the regulation. And I think that's really up to you, because it's really up to you, because they are your regulations, and I'm fine, you know, either way. I see both ways here, which is why I thought Zach met the eligibility criteria. But I totally get Helen and town council talking about the intent of the regulation.
So, Zach, what is the purpose of the corporation if it's holding an aquaculture license, but it's not part of a grant? What exactly does the corporation do?
I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but you know, we sell oysters.
So you have the right to sell oysters off, an equal right to sell oysters off of that grant, but you don't own the grant.
No, that I don't have any rights to sell oysters off of that grant.
And why? So what do you have the right to do if you're a member of the corporation?
You know, all of the normal rights of a corporation, but the corporation is not associated with the grant at all. I can't claim any right to that grant.
So what do you do?
We can do a number of things. We can,
No. What do you do? What do you do as far as oystering goes? What's your job?
well, right now I'm actually in the office guy. I'm not on the grant too often, but for the first 6 years, I worked the grant. And now I run the business.
All right. So that's the clarification I was looking for. How long have you been running the business? How long have you been in the office?
2 years.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board, or I can open up to comments from the public?
So
I have
one
a
more,
question.
Courtney, one more question.
Okay, and then it's Justina and Mike and Kathleen.
Yeah. Quick question. Zach, are you listed as an employee of the corporation
Yes.
or an employee of the grant holders?
No, employee of the corporation.
Okay, well, and a member of the corporation.
Correct.
That's different than being an employee, but thank you very much. Thank you for
I'm
answering the
actually
question.
both.
Okay.
So anybody else?
Justina has had her hand up.
Okay.
Zach, are you a co-owner of the corporation or an employee?
Both.
And does the corporation, how many people are either owners or employees on the corporation?
3 owners / employees.
And you're one of them.
Correct.
And are you involved in selling, you sell your own oysters to customers or to wholesalers?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say that if you got this new grant, you would expand the total acreage available to that corporation because you're one of the 3 owners, so suddenly there'd be more acreage, is that correct?
I don't know. Maybe. I may want to do my own thing.
You might want to, so if you stayed with the corporation, it would expand that operation. If you broke off on your own, it would be yours.
I think that's reasonable, yeah.
But you
know
don't
what-
have anything in writing for us to go by, is that correct?
Just on the application, my 5-year plan.
Okay, my concern here is twofold. We get into a lot of situations on the board where we're asked to go by the regulations. And it makes a lot of tough decisions. And I think it's clear that the spirit of these regulations were to give the opportunity to earn a living on a grant to those who were not on a grant. And you're kind of in a gray area, but it is a gray area. And I think that we've, in my time on the board, it's been clear how important it is to apply the rules and regulations and apply them cleanly. So right now you are a member of a corporation that farms a grant, and you're looking to expand that situation, and whether you break off or not at a later date and time is unknown currently. So I would tend to say perhaps it's cleaner to offer this grant lottery to those who don't currently have grants.
I can definitely see that, and I want the same thing, and I agree with the spirit of it. My contention is maybe there's someone else in the lottery tonight who is using someone else's grant at this moment.
Well, the problem of making determinations is the precedent it sets, correct? I mean, I've seen you on the Shellfish Advisory, and I think that you're an incredibly valuable member of the shellfish community. But let's say we get another corporation that wants to put one of their members out to get a grant, and suddenly that corporation has more acres to farm. The precedent for me as a business person is, you're in a corporation on another grant, and your position is gray, and therefore the impact on that corporation is gray. Whereas, if somebody signs up to join the lottery, get the grant, and they'll be working independently, it's more cleanly in the spirit of the regulations. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
May I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
I definitely see that. And like I said, I would like to work within the spirit of it. And I think, I mean, the only difference I'm seeing is the corporation part. If someone else is working in tandem with someone, you know, borrowing part of a grant or in business with someone else, but just not a corporation, they could do the same thing. It's just that it happens to be a corporation. I mean, it's so there's Joe and Sue working on the same grant. Joe owns it and Sue borrows it, but Sue can go apply for another grant and keep working with Joe if she wants to, expand their operation. And to be clear and to be honest, that might be what happens. We might expand our operation. I might decide to let Holbrook Oyster use part of that grant if I were to get it.
Well, hasn't Holbrook Oysters expanded? And it's my understanding it's not a small operation. And now Holbrook Oyster will get access to more grants. And I think that we shouldn't be speculating about the Bob, Sue, or whatever in your example. I think we're talking about you. And I think that we're making a determination about your position. And one of the things that we've determined is Holbrook Oysters will have access to more acreage if you win the lottery. So
Yeah.
that's going to stick with the facts that we have and not some hypothetical other people that might have other circumstances at another time.
Agreed. I was just trying to compare it, but yeah, that may happen. Holbrook Oyster may use more acreage, but in the long run, I will have, or in the short run, in any case, if I were to win it, Zach Dixon will have rights to a grant, whereas now he doesn't.
Well,
that said, I think you know we've said it all. I think at this point, and I will go with what you think. I would just ask you to consider that I am not the corporation. Neither I nor the corporation has any rights to a grant. And if you decide that that disqualifies me, then I'll abide by that for sure.
it's not, it doesn't seem like it's in the best spirit to offer up a grant to a Holbrook Oyster.
So this bylaw states that anyone whose name does not appear on another license applies to hold the license. The select board shall hold a public lottery. So Zach, does your name appear on any other license, on another license?
A grant license?
It doesn't say grant license, it just says license. So I'm assuming it's a grant license.
My name is not on any grant license.
Okay, so then I think it's okay, and Nancy can correct me, anybody else can correct me, but that's what the regulation says. If his name doesn't appear on another license, that we could move on and include him in the lottery.
Janet, just a moment, but KP Law asks the select board to look at the spirit of the law and not just the language. So I think we should possibly take a vote on it because I think that the spirit of the law is the issue.
Janet, I've had my hand up for a while. This is Kathleen.
Okay,
May I, Madam Chair?
you may.
Good evening, Zach. It's Kathleen Bacon. I was surprised to see your name on this lottery. A little taken aback. We've all watched what you've done with Holbrook Oyster and the Dalby brothers in the past half dozen years. You've taken a scrappy operation and made it big time. You really have. You've done a great job. And you've done well. You know, financially, you've done well. I looked at this lottery way back when we knew we were going to put this grant into a lottery with regard to the intent. The intent being that individuals of lesser income, of lesser means, if you will, but the heart and hard work would be able to take a chance at getting a grant for themselves. That said, I also want to point out that it's highly unlikely, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would not be using this grant to garner, more for Holbrook Oyster. It just makes sense that you would be doing so. And in doing so, increasing the capacity for sales and financial gain for Holbrook Oyster, if you were to gain this grant. The other thing I want to impart is it's very unlikely that the Dalby brothers are going to kick you to the curb. I think you guys are a rock solid team and will continue to do so. So I'm not in favor of you being a part of this lottery. I'm looking at the intent of the regulation to again, someone of lesser means having a heart and hard work. So that's my feeling on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so does anybody,
Chair?
any other comments? What?
Mike
Madam-
DeVasto.
Mm,
I'm going to recuse myself from this, but I'd like the opportunity to speak from the audience for a moment, if that's all right.
I don't think so, Mike.
Why? It's not up to you, Kathleen. I'm asking Janet. It's for
I think
information.
Yeah,
Recuse is a recuse, Janet.
No, you can speak from the audience, Kathleen. That is the law.
you can, if you have it. We could take Nancy's word or Mr. Takanian's on, but yeah, he can speak if he, yeah. You have to change your seat though, Mike. You have to go into the audience.
Okay, I will shut my video off.
And actually, I'll just ask Mr. Takanian since I think he's still on. Do you find a problem with that?
I have to unmute him. Hang on.
Yep.
Harry?
Yeah, I'm here. I think if you recuse yourself because of a potential conflict of interest violation, you don't give up your rights as an individual citizen. While the recommended practice is that you absent yourself from the meeting, I don't think that it's unlawful for an individual to speak as an individual. You just have to be clear about their, what they're doing.
Thank you. And I don't believe there would be any financial gain from Mr. DeVasto. Okay, so Mike, you can say what you want to say, but say it without prejudice. Just give the facts.
Sure. So just looking at the regulations, this corporation holds no aquaculture license. It's essentially a business structure or an agreement between a party to share finances in a business, right? But the regulation is pretty clear that it basically is making sure that corporations that have a name on a license, like ARC, that corporation owns a license, that anyone on that board of that corporation, because that corporation currently holds an aquaculture license, is not qualified to apply for another one. The difference here is that this corporation, which is essentially an agreement amongst parties who are working together, doesn't actually have any standing in the ownership of the aquaculture license. And I think that's a really important point. And I don't think that it's correct that the spirit of the rule was to prevent people who were working together from being able to apply. And looking at the list, it seems like there's other people that are working together also. Some people structure their partnerships in corporations because it's a more clear-cut way to share the profits. But as far as I know, Holbrook Oyster operates 1.5 acres. The maximum in the town of Wellfleet is 7 acres. So they're nowhere near the maximum anyways. Holbrook Oyster doesn't actually operate the license. They don't own the license. So I think it would be discriminatory actually to not allow someone who's technically qualified into the lottery. And I don't see anywhere where it says means tested eligibility. And I'm sure that when aquaculture licenses were originally granted, they didn't means test for those who are like less fortunate or don't have any money, you know what I mean? Or so I think that it's a bit discriminatory to say just because you're a member of a corporation that has no rights to a license, rather than a different type of structure where it's a handshake or it doesn't say LLC, say you know, proprietorship or partnership. So I just think that, you know, there's nothing in this rule that actually precludes Zach Dixon from participating in the lottery. That's my opinion.
So does our shellfish constable want the last word? But I would kind of agree and want to move on and include Zach in the lottery.
I'm unmuting her. Go ahead, Nance.
I don't need to have the last word. I think you guys have had a very healthy and open public discussion that I appreciate.
Okay, thank you. So somebody mentioned a vote. I don't really think we need a vote, but I would include Zach Dixon in this lottery.
Yes, Helen.
Helen set this up at all was because of Zach's membership in a corporation, and I'm satisfied with it after hearing from everybody. Thank you. So I just seconded it. Janet's motion. Was that a motion?
No, we don't really need a motion because it was really just
Janet?
a discussion. Yes? Who's talking? Anybody?
I think Helen's having connectivity issues.
I do too.
I would like a motion to clarify. Oh, no, I'm not. Oh,
You just make your motion.
me, Helen?
So he's Courtney, he's on the list and I have the number.
Yes.
Yeah,
You
he's
want me
already
to
on the
make the
list.
motion? Yeah.
He's
let's just-
already on the list.
So-
Nancy declared him as
Do we all
eligible.
agree to put him on?
We
Yeah.
need a motion, Helen.
So should we take no action? Should we take no action?
Yes,
Well,
that's,
yeah, you just proceed with the lottery.
yes, we'll proceed
Yeah.
with the lottery.
In other words, but let's have the words in the minutes that we're taking no action, please.
You got
Thank
it.
you.
Okay. All right, so moving forward, I now will insert number 9. Where's my camera? Number 9 into the box. That will be the 9th person in the lottery. So I'll put that in the box. Everyone can see the box. Move my microphone. And I'm putting number 9 in. And let's see. Okay, I am spinning it. Spinning both directions, spinning a lot. And before I pull it out, I will show you the list of names that the Shellfish Constable Nancy Chavetta has given me. Whether you can see them or not, they correspond to the number that I will pick. This has all been preordained. Okay, oh, that's a hard one. Okay. I will not look. I will look at you guys while I pick one. And we get number 7, Robert Emmett gets the lottery.
Okay.
Okay, everybody hear that?
I have him as number 3.
That's printed in your packet?
Yeah,
Let me see.
I have
Madam
just,
Chair?
I have Caitlin Sarrazin as number 7.
Well, I got a, I don't know. This is my roster and this is what I'm going by.
Let me see
Madam
if
Chair?
Nancy has anything.
Sorry. So what I did was,
You're right, yeah.
I inverted the numbers so that it wouldn't be just discernible immediately. So I inverted the list and so it's in backwards order. And on my list, Robert Emmett is also not, Robert Emmett is 7. Can you see me right now?
Yeah, okay.
I have
Yeah.
the third ones, that's right. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, sorry about that. I just was trying to be less.
Very, very open, good and fair. So yes, Robert Emmett gets the lottery.
So I'll make a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay,
I move that the town enter into a lease agreement with Robert Emmett for the use of grants 861 and 861A for a term of 2 years.
there a second?
Ellen, second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye by name, voice, name vote.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Justina, I.
And Janet, aye. Michael is abstaining.
Recused. Yep.
4-1.
Congratulations, Robert Emmett.
All right, good. Moving on to to determine to issue a commercial, whether to issue a commercial shell fishing permit to Karen Johnson by waiving the 1-year domicile requirement. Are there any comments or questions?
I'd like to recuse myself from this also, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Uh,
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. So, this is yet another thing where the regulations are very clear about this. And there were several, that means like 3 or more go-rounds about this on the Shellfish Advisory Committee. I had an exchange with Nancy Chavetta about it today. And we refreshed each other's memories, mine preceding hers, because the first time this came up was when the SAB was revising, refreshing the regs a while back. And at one point, there was no length of domiciled status requirement in this regulation. At another point, it was 6 months. And recently, the Shellfish Advisory Board really chewed on this, really talked about it, met on it, and made it a year. And the rationale had to do with actual on-the-ground experiences with people who would improbably come in and get a commercial permit and just be there for a quick hit on the fishery. I'm summarizing, but that is the gist of it. And so the Shellfish Committee, and I want to remind everybody that that means then the Select Board approved this regulation. But what's most important is the DMF then looks at all our regulations, and it was approved by the DMF.
Oh, my God.
So the follow-up to this is in not one, not two, but several places in the regulations and even in the policy, the need to be a domiciled resident is emphasized and required. And Ms. Johnson has every other qualification, and she's moved to Wellfleet, and it's only regrettable that staff made a mistake, and it's understandable because this has been a bit of a moving target. Staff wasn't aware of this change, which is only in recent years that it's gone up to a year. And Ms. Johnson has had work here in Wellfleet. She just hasn't been able to hold her own commercial permit, and she will be able to do so as soon as the year is over and the clock's been ticking for a while. And I think that first of all, if I may do it on behalf of the board, we should apologize for this mix-up when she first came in to apply for a commercial permit. In other words, that was a mistake. And I think that given that the specificity of the words in the regulation are so clear that we should just stick to them because there's no exemption allowed for this matter. I'm going to say this again, there are only about 3 or 4 places in the whole regs where there's any wiggle room, where it's discretionary. The select board can, the regulatory shellfishing board, the select board can call a moratorium. We can, according to the regulations, grant a hardship exemption if 3 conditions are met, for commercial permit. And then there's some discretionary stuff for the constable in the overwintering agreement. And I think there's one more place, but otherwise there's no discretion. It's exactly what the language is. And which is why I felt that there should have been a healthy conversation about our last agenda item. And I'm glad that there was, and I feel at peace with it. So the point is, I don't feel Ms. Johnson, since she has not lived here for a year, as a domiciled resident, as defined in the regulations very clearly in terms of length of time here, should have a commercial permit. And I'm going to say it again, there's no appeal for this kind of thing. It's just not allowed, according to the DMF, according to us, and according to the Shellfish Committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does Ms. Johnson want to weigh in on this? Have anything to say?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, I think Helen brought up the point that I don't believe the spirit of this original reg was to penalize people that are in the business from moving here. And yet that's what's happened. While certainly I've only been living here since last year, I have been working in the town for several years. I think that, am I asking for special consideration for that? Yes, actually I am. But I do think there is a process. It's a hardship process. It gives the board the right to give somebody the opportunity to have a commercial license if it's causing them a hardship not having one. Certainly, I mean, if there was ever a time when there was a hardship, it's during a pandemic. To say that someone can move to the town and then can't work as what they've been doing for years, can't do their occupation for a year, seems extreme. And it seems extreme, and it does cause a significant hardship on my ability to live here and to raise a family here. This is what I do for a living. This is my occupation. I'm not looking for, a residential license to go shellfishing on the weekend. This is how I make a living. And by having to wait a full year, I'm being penalized and being held back on my opportunity to do what I do for a living. We don't do this for other occupations. If a plumber moves to town, you don't tell him he can't work for a year. An electrician moves to town, you don't tell him he can't work for a year. A landscaper, it seems like it's discriminating against shellfishermen. So I think it is possible to grant someone a license to move away from the regulations. I think there is wiggle room. I don't think it's particularly clear also, I should point that out. It might seem clear when you're involved in the process and you're writing the regs and you say, oh, well, we'll just change something in the glossary. It's not clear if you've moved here. I read the regulations before I moved here, and I saw that nowhere in the regulations did it say there was a 1-year residency requirement. Now, since that time, the regulations that are posted online have been updated, but the one that was online before I moved here, which I reviewed, was from January, which there was no regulation. I was then advised it was put in the regulations last year in July. However, the only place where domiciled resident is defined is in the glossary. Now, I am a domiciled resident. Just because the shellfish regulations defines the term differently, that is different than any other part of town. I mean, I have a beach sticker. I have a dump sticker. I pay my taxes here. I have my car here. I pay significantly higher rent than what I was paying before to live here. I pay my utilities here. I vote here. I'm an active member of the community. I've been working in this town for 4 years, over 4 years now, 4.5 years. I do think that experience and commitment to the town and commitment to the profession should matter. And I do feel like the regulation unfairly penalizes me for moving here. And a year is a long time. People are saying, oh, it's only a year. A year is a long time to be held back from being able to make a living. So I would like that taken into consideration. I do think there should be a way that the board can go ahead and approve someone's license as a hardship. I'd like to also note that I didn't do anything wrong. I went and I applied for my license. I filled out the application truthfully. On the application that I filled out, it does not say anything about a 1-year requirement. It says, I went there with my copy of my registration showing my address in Wellfleet. I showed up with my electric bill. I showed up with my Massachusetts Shellfish transaction card. I paid my $310. I was given my license. When I was given the license, there's a form on there that says something about the 30-day review by the Shellfish Department. It was 31 days later where I was watching the sunset at the pier when Constable Savetta told me that she was revoking my license. I then read in the Shellfish regulations, I believe it's 11.7, that if your license is revoked, you have a right to a hearing within 30 days. It's been over 3 months.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Yes,
Kathleen had her hand up first, Helen.
Okay.
excellent. That's fine.
Thank you, Helen. Madam Chair, Karen, this is Kathleen Bacon. You and I have spoken with regard to this issue.
Yeah.
I want you to know, I hear you and I understand what you're feeling, but I also want you to know that I sat on the board in July when Constable Chavetta came to us, and this was one of the first regulations that she wanted to button down, new sheriff in town. And she explained to this board why she wanted to make this requirement 1 year. She wanted this requirement to be 1 year to not only protect the industry, but to protect the people out on the flats. It meant something to have a commercial shell fishing permit in Wellfleet. We are unequivocally the shellfish capital of the world. It means something to have a commercial shell fishing permit in this town. We are asking all individuals to have a year under their belt before they get that, permit in hand. I do understand, your inability to not work a grant for yourself, but I do know that you are working and doing quite well with Richard Blakely on his grant. I'm very, very reluctant in leaving this board to set a precedent to waive, to waive this regulation and set a precedent. I have lived in this town most all my life, and I have watched one select board after another poo-poo Andy Koch or any other shellfish constable and say, oh, that regulation doesn't count. I will not do that. I will not set a precedent for the board that follows me in the future that says, well, you did this that year, you're going to have to do it again now. So I'm going to stick with the regulation. I'm really sorry. And 7 months to go before you can get that commercial permit in your hand, and it'll be well worth it. I know you work hard. I know how much you want this, but I cannot, in good conscience, set a precedent and waive this regulation. Sorry. Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, I would like to comment that, you know,
Well, we need to, sorry, Karen. Janet,
ahead.
Janet, I'm trying to unmute Janet. She's.
Okay.
Go ahead, Janet.
Thank you. All right, well, we've heard from Kathleen and Helen, and I understand, Karen, but we do have to follow the regulations, and the regulation is there because we do want the people that do have the commercial license to really know our regulations. I mean, I'll even start with that. So unless you need to say, may I have a motion?
I've got my hand up, Janet, please.
Okay. Just
Yeah. May I speak?
Yes.
Yes.
Is this a motion?
Through
Helen?
you, Janet, to Karen. Ms. Johnson, the thing about definitions is they are as an important and in some ways most important part of regulations because they define exactly what is meant by a term. And defining domiciled resident in the 9 years I was on the committee and subsequently is the most discussed section of the regulations. That is to say, that part of the definitions, which is section 1 of the regulations, of any other reg, because it's so important. And again in the regulations, you have to be domiciled the minute you're not living in Wellfleet, your shellfish permit, your commercial shellfish permit gets revoked the minute you're not domiciled here. It's a very, very tough reg. And I'm glad that you have had work here and that you will continue to have work in the next 7 months. And thank you, Kathleen, for enumerating that. And I look forward to hearing, having you apply for a commercial permit on the very day that you have fulfilled your 1 year domiciled requirement. But I agree with Kathleen, and there is no hardship exemption for this. There is nothing in the regs, which I'm horribly familiar with, that allows for any exemption to this. We have no wiggle room in this area at all. Thank you.
So Helen, would you like to make a motion?
Yes. In accordance with, may I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In accordance with the town's shellfishing policy and regulations, including the definition of resident in section 1, the last sentence of section 7.8.1, and the language of the last paragraph of section 2, which is the shellfishing policy for the town, whose purpose is, whose title is Purpose of Regulations. That's where it tells you why these regulations are there. That's not part of the motion. I move not to issue a commercial shellfishing permit to Karen Johnson at this time, which puts no onus, no prejudice on her right to apply in the future. That's the reason I finished the motion with at this time. Thank you.
Second.
Kathleen seconds, please voice vote.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Justina, I.
And Janet, I, for the motion and one abstaining, recusing.
No, yeah.
One recusing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hard job. Okay, well now I hope we have Senator Sear and Representative Peak on the line to bring us up to date. And I will let Courtney unmute them and bring them on as she wishes.
Yep, so they're both unmuted, and I'm gonna get out of this screen so you can see their faces.
Hi, everybody. I think the senator's on as well. Julian, are you there?
Yep, I'm on. Yep.
All right. Oh, there you are. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hi,
Sure.
everybody. Good to see everyone, even if you're in a postage size box on my computer. Hope everybody is doing well during these strained and strenuous times when even simple things like trying to have a Board of Selectmen's meeting gets more complicated because of the way we we have to conduct our business now. So Julian and I appreciate you making time on your agenda for us this evening. And we've been making the rounds of every Board of Selectmen in Barnstable County. And I think the senator has actually zoomed over to the islands to meet with all of them. But we felt after the governor's guidances came out, and his revised guidances came out last week, that we wanted to touch base with all of the boards to connect with you guys, to let you and the constituents know who are watching that the entire Cape delegation is very involved in the entire reopening process, to the extent that there is a Cape Cod reopening task force that the senator was instrumental in helping set up. And while we don't sit on any of the advisory boards and all of the decisions rest in the executive branch, we are working certainly on the legislative side to bring bills forward, to make sure that your local government can continue to work, and then to try to help influence and probably more appropriately inform decisions that the administration is making moving forward. But also we're jumping in on everybody's Zoom meetings to let you know that we're all partners in government together. And certainly we're no farther away than an email or a phone call or a text message from any of the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen here. So Julian, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, Sarah's right. We've been doing a bit of a road show, so it's quite convenient with the Zoom. At least this is my I think this is my 15th select board meeting. Wellesley gets the prize because we waited the longest. Barnstable is 55 minutes, but you folks were a good hour. So we're cautiously optimistic, that we're going to have a season here. I think Cape Cod's made a strong case for the unique needs of the region, really balancing, our geographic isolation, the vulnerable population we have, with, the fact that the vast majority of us make our living here in a very short season. The aim of the work that we're doing in this Cape Cod reopening task force that's been convened, the aim is really twofold: to save lives and to save livelihoods. And so we've been working across the delegation in a bipartisan fashion to be speaking with one voice as a region. I think that's really crucial. If you look at the governor's reopening plan, it is the foundation of it is based on personal responsibility and is based on adherence to the public health guidelines. There's basically 4 things we're asking people to do, and everyone should know what these are by now. It's cover your nose and mouth when you can't be apart, washing hands and washing surfaces frequently, keeping your distance, and then staying vigilant for symptoms, and staying home if you're sick. And if people follow those, we will be able, there's a plan, we'll be able to move through a phased reopening. And if those are not followed, we're going to see that in the health surveillance data. And that's going to delay, economic activity, relief, and reopening. I think messaging really is the key piece here. And so, while I'm glad to get into questions around enforcement, around the different businesses that are allowed now, what's coming in phase 2, what's coming in phase 3, we're really aiming to have region-wide consistency and to be speaking with one voice. Our seasonal residents, and certainly our visitors, and even some of our year-round residents, don't necessarily distinguish between Truro and Eastham or Yarmouth and Mashpee. They see this place as Cape Cod. And so if we don't have uniform health information, if people don't know what they need to do, whether they're at a beach or in line at a restaurant to pick up food, or the myriad of activities in our life, lack of clarity leads to greater risk, will not lead to widespread adherence, and will set us back. We're really pushing that, and I'm really encouraged that Wellfleet has been meeting with this group we're finally calling sort of the elbow up group, so sort of outer and lower Cape towns, to coordinate across town managers, administrators, and select board chairs. I think that coordination across towns is crucial. We really want to be speaking with one voice. A patchwork of policies in any area, I actually really worry is a threat to public health, and is going to not actually allow us to protect our health and also ultimately be able to open up when we can. You know, we're really urging against a patchwork approach here, and towns going it their own way. You know, I'll say publicly right here, towns will not have my support if they go their own way. You may have authority to do so, but it's really not in the best interest of public health and safety. And so I think I'm encouraged that the Lower and Outer Cape towns are working collaboratively. I'm really encouraged by the you know, the work that's been done as a region. I think it's actually positioned Cape Cod to be in a stronger position. And right now, you know, now we're really in implementation. And so we need real consistency. We need everyone's help to be sort of pulling in the same direction with the same sort of consistent message. You know, so that's sort of the update we have. You know, I know there's sort of specific questions and issues we've been working on, everything from childcare, which, you know, I think both Sarah and I have said is sort of inadequate, to lots of questions around certainly restaurants, short-term leisure accommodations, whether it be hotels and motels or rentals, a whole myriad of pieces. Most of the activities in our seasonal economy, most of it's phase 2, some of it's phase 3. The soonest phase 2 would start would be June 8th. There's a 3-week sort of minimum period of time between each phases. And if we get to June 8th and move to phase 2, then phase 3, the soonest phase 3 could start is June 29th. I will close on this, that so the reopening task force, we meet twice a week. We've got participation from all key stakeholders, including representatives from town managers, administrators, and select board members. Last Friday, we put out updated guidance to seasonal residents and ultimately to visitors that comply with the governor's, you know, with the governor's orders. So as Sarah said at the outset, we're not making the rules of the road. We're actually not, in many cases, in the room where those decisions are being made, but we're really trying to go to bat for our region and make sure that the region has very consistent implementation and a real consistent public health message. I believe that's the best chance we have to save lives and to be able to reopen sooner. So thank you again for the time and your collaboration. I'm glad to take, I think, just a few questions. And then
Julian,
we'll take
I just want to hit on the consistency message a little bit also. You know, the reopening task force has set, I think, what's really a very conservative course for the state in reopening. And as you guys know, we've all read the material by now. There are 4 phases, and it's being presented really that each phase is 3 weeks in length, because that gives adequate time to gather the data and make a decision about moving on, you know, like from phase 1 to phase 2. But I would remind people, you know, what Julian talked about with self-responsibility, it's not a guarantee that it's a linear movement from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4. The state can move in a backwards direction on this also. And part of what, in fact, entirely what they are looking at, because public health will be driving these decisions, is a consistent set of data by which to measure what's going on with the public health data. So if some communities make different decisions, and, you know, I'll just put it right out there because you guys have been in the paper about this, for example, about changing a length of stay for short-term rentals, or if a different community makes a different decision about how many seats they're going to be allowed in a restaurant or what the distancing is, that screws up the statewide data. And that messes up people's lives and livelihoods, because if there's a blip, and we can either move forward more rapidly or go backwards on this, what Department of Public Health, DPH, is going to be looking at, they're making assumptions that their guidelines are being followed, and it's because of these guidelines being followed that certain things are happening. So if those guidelines aren't being followed, arguably even in a quote unquote stricter sense, then the data that flows from that behavior isn't being accurately interpreted. So there is a lot at stake here. And I will emphasize or re-emphasize that public health has driven this wagon. It's not you know, the business people who sat around the table, but it's public health that's driving this. And quite honestly, some of these public health decisions have driven constituents of the senators and mine to send us not very nice emails over this last weekend, wondering why they're not open when other things are open. But that's all right. We can deal with all of that. So you know, I would like the people who are watching this, and certainly the Board of Selectmen, to know that what is driving the decisions by the Baker administration are public health considerations. And believe me, I think nobody wants a positive outcome to come from this more than Governor Baker does. So again, with a consistency message, it's just important that we all hang in this together. We did a great job as individual citizens doing our staying safe at home, and that's why we are where we are today. We're beginning to be able to crack open that door and allow some economic activity to resume. And I think all of us on this call know that we have a short season here. There's going to be a world of hurt even with a partial reopening, even if restaurants on June 8th, let's say, are able to open at a much diminished capacity. Julian and I both know that our job isn't done. We need to continue to work with our federal delegation as well as with state officials to know that the safety nets are going to be there for the businesses and for the people who work in those businesses, because Julian grew up in a restaurant. I ran our own B&B for 23 years. We both have the experience of knowing that if you don't have a robust summer, it doesn't carry you through, and that bank account empties out pretty darn early into the winter. So it's a big ecosystem. There's a lot of stuff going on, the public health considerations, the economic considerations, and I don't think we can look at any of them in their own silo because they're so interconnected.
Well said, Sarah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Both of you have spoken very well, and I hear and get what you're saying, and appreciate your focus, because this is really hard to focus on. You're taking, every time we take a step, we're taking a step into the unknown. So if there's a few questions for either Julian or Sarah, I guess they're both going to take a few questions. How do you want to work this with Courtney? I guess.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, thank you both, Senator Senior and Representative Peak, for being on. Our first question is coming from Select Board Member Michael DeVasto.
Okay, Michael.
Hi, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it.
Nice background, Mike. I like that.
I got to see your background
right there.
Yeah.
But obviously we're all very concerned about the economic situation down here. And if this was a conversation that was happening at the end of September, it wouldn't be a big deal. I think we all understand that the Outer Cape as a region functions very differently than the rest of the state, in that its standing workforce is incredibly low. And without J1 workers and the capacity for businesses to operate at even close to even 50% of their typical capacity, I just am really concerned about the volume of people, the volume of turnover, and becoming a sort of hub of a revolving door where we don't have the capacity as a town, as a region, to handle the people who are here. That being cleaners, grocery store workers, restaurant workers, all these crucial members of our economy that are sort of lacking. We've got an unemployment system where people are, getting very generous benefits right now up until the end of July. So I think it's simple. It's a lot more complicated, the idea of sort of reopening a tourist economy in the situation that we have in the Outer Cape. And I'm a little nervous that the governor is not sort of going, hey, let's just sort of, make sure we do what works for the Outer Cape, because we're a small population in reality. And I understand, in a standing population, it's much easier to open businesses. If it was end of September right now and everything was opening up, there wouldn't be these types of compounding issues that we're going to face this summer. And I've helped my mom clean houses. I know a lot of people who clean houses that are high risk people. They're in there. The pressure of a turnover day on a Saturday when you have 8 or so houses to clean and you're in and out. I mean, I'm highly concerned that as a region, we face much more difficult circumstances than the rest of the state does, with our capacity to handle the influx of people. And I don't think there was ever, not that it wasn't mentioned, but the whole time we've talked about, short-term rental restrictions, it's always been in the context that it would need to be a regionally sort of addressed issue. So I'm just wondering what your feelings are about, how the governor and how this reopening phase, and in New York, I know they did it region by region a little bit, and in the state of Massachusetts, it seems to be a one-size-fits-all opening, phasing, opening, and I think it's really complicated here. I just, the downstream effects, and there's workers at supermarkets that are at their breaking point already, and they just cannot hire someone to relieve those workers that are working 45 to 60 hours a week. And, the idea of the shifting burden of food demand going from restaurants back into those grocery stores, and increasing their load, just is daunting to me. And I've spoken to supermarket managers, and it's daunting to them as well. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I can take that. So, we have a number of, I would say, relatively unique factors here on the Outer Cape. And I say that as someone who, clearly shamelessly thinks that this is the best place, and not only in the Commonwealth, but in the world. I live here, I grew up here. But I actually now have a new vantage point where, I represent most all the region. And certainly on the Outer Cape, we resemble, a lot like the islands. Even the workforce in the Lower Cape, and even if you look at kind of how our seasonal economy works, on the Mid Cape and the rest of the region, or even in the Berkshires, on the Upper Cape and the Mid Cape, there's more of like sort of a stable year-round population that works. But if anything, sort of the influx of staff needed for tourism activities actually looks a lot like what we have out here. So we've got a steep challenge. I think my hope is that in a better case scenario, there's a bit of a right sizing here. I think and the rosiest projections are that we're going to have a muted season, and I think this weekend was indicative of that. People I think are going to be much more cautious about coming here. If they do come here, I think we expect them to be much more muted in their activities. I think we have a strain. There's a strain in our community sort of every sort of summer, sort of for those 8 weeks. I've been making sure that I'm asking, I'm asking this question to Cape Cod Healthcare, right? Are you ready to handle the population influx that we traditionally see in the summer? Are y'all ready to handle that? The answer from Mike Locke is yes. When we talk to other healthcare assets as well, when we look at, when we look at sort of, those are kind of the metrics I'm really kind of interested in. Healthcare, when we ask from a public safety and first response perspective, do we have the police, the fire, those sort of assets in place? The answer I've heard primarily, I haven't spoken directly to the chiefs in Wellfleet, but we will. But from others on the Outer Cape have been yes. And so, I think this is something we have to look at and watch closely. But I think that we're, especially after this weekend, I just don't expect this is going to be a mob scene here. I think that my sense is when leisure accommodations are going to be able to open, the cleaning protocols are going to be such that you can't do a 45-minute clean and a turnover. Just of my sense of what the industry's proposed, not even what government's going to require, but that standard. So I think, Mike, we've talked about these. I think, these are real concerns for our community and real challenges. But, when I look at sort of the crucial indicators that we need to meet, first and foremost, it's healthcare and what is our capacity. Certainly, that's always a challenge when you're living on an island or you're living on the Outer Cape. But I think healthcare, I think looking at, how people's behavior is going to be. And this is really why this key message is so important. And why, look, Massachusetts is a tiny little state. We're, I think, the second or third, fourth most densest state in the country. So whereas I certainly understand and appreciate, and we understand and appreciate the regional distinctions that we have, this is really a pretty small place. And so I think that the governor, particularly for Eastern Massachusetts, treating Eastern Massachusetts as one, I think makes sense. And also is sort of what the rules of the road that we're living in. So I think we need to find, I'm really curious about like, what are other good metrics that we can kind of assess how the system is. I think right now there's certainly a lot of stress on the part of essential workers. I think more broadly, there's a lot of just anxiety and uncertainty. I mean, this is just such a deeply uncertain time about what this is going to be. And I think reopening is hard. Sarah said this, and I've stolen it because I love it so much, is that, reopening in many ways is harder than closing. And so that's why I think if we're in it together, if we have a consistent message, that's really going to be what serves us best. And we're able to manage it. And, the health data is going to show us when things are unmanageable, even before we kind of get to that point. But I think we're looking at a very sort of different, cautious and muted season. And that's what the indicators are showing to me. But I think we have to stay really vigilant on this issue. And particularly in figuring out when things are seeming untenable or difficult, or there's really concerns, having really strong feedback loop so there can be enforcement action, having feedback around messaging. I think that's really important, and that's what we're trying to do with this task force as well. Even something as simple as like, a lot of businesses don't want to take cash right now, which I get, right? There's a state law, you got to take cash. Giving businesses a template poster that says, what you can actually say to encourage people not to pay with cash, but not get yourself in trouble with the law. Those are the sort of, sometimes almost small but meaningful strategies that we're trying to identify so we can have a season, but we can keep everyone safe.
Right. And so the numerous business owners and employees who have reached out to me have a high degree of anxiety. And the high degree of anxiety is what's going to happen when the end of July comes around and the federal benefits disappear and the businesses aren't open. Restaurant owners have a high degree of anxiety that they'll open, but there won't be enough people to fill their restaurants even at 50%. So to Julian's point, we're not having a season that's going to look like a robust carnival week in Provincetown all summer long. I think you're going to find people who come to the Cape because they love it. They find it's a place of respite where they can recharge and reinvigorate themselves and connect with family, many of whom they may not have seen for months. And they'll be able to do that here and maybe go out or get takeout for a meal or two. I've seen restaurants that even with the experience of being open prior to Memorial Day weekend have reconfigured how they're doing takeout and curbside pickup. Some have gone to an appointment process. Some have gone to you must wait in your vehicle. Others have taken furniture out of dining room areas so that there can be a point of entrance and a point of exit. But the point is, I think that if and when the state issued guidelines allow, whether it's overnight accommodations or restaurants or retail stores to open, we owe it to those people who have invested in our community to allow them the chance to figure out how it is they're going to open, or to figure out that they can't figure that out and they choose not to open. But I don't think that that is the senator's job or my job or necessarily the Board of Selectmen's job. These are people who have made the decision to put down roots and open a business, and they have been giving this a lot of thought. Most people I talk to say, we're ready. We have 5 plans in place, depending on what the governor's guidelines are. We've bought shower curtains to be between tables in our restaurant, whatever it might be. So I know that often we as policymakers, we want to be ahead of the curve and we want to fill a vacuum. And right now there is a vacuum because we're sort of in phase 1. We don't know how it's going to go. We don't know if phase 2 is going to be tweaked, but patience is a hard thing. But I think that exercising patience, letting the data drive our decisions is how we're going to best serve all of our mutual constituents.
Thank you. I think there's a few hands raised, but I do want to ask people, we're only halfway through our agenda.
Right, Janet, I have my hand up.
Yeah, she just wants to tell people to keep their comments and questions a little shorter, and we can provide contact information to Senator Sear and Representative Peake's office after the meeting to those as well. But Kathleen, if Janet will let you speak, you're welcome to.
Well,
How about we take questions from the board, and then, we can share our contact information. It's getting to be 8:30 already this evening. And
So I
Great,
just
thank you, Sarah.
I just want to finish what I was saying is that after Sarah and Julian leave, we are then, the rest of our agenda, or a lot of it, is centered around COVID-19 update from the town and from things we have already learned from them. So yeah, just keep your comments and questions and simple. How's that?
Great. Janet, Kathleen, Senator Sear and Sarah Peak, how are you? It's Kathleen Bacon.
Hi, Kathleen.
Good
Nice
to see you, Kathleen.
I'm leaving my illustrious career on the select board.
Yes.
So I wanted to take an opportunity to say to you both, I'm very grateful to have had this chance to be on the select board. But more importantly, I'm grateful to you both because I've always felt you've had my back. You've always had my back. We've had some very controversial issues come this end of the Cape. I'm not going to illustrate them tonight, but I haven't had to figure them out all by myself. You both have been there. So I want to say that, thank you very much for that. Two, I think one of the biggest things that you impart tonight, Sarah, is that these decisions are being health driven. And I think that's the biggest, biggest word we can use right now. It's all health driven. I agree that, that the data is going to tell us what we can do and what we cannot do. I've talked to a lot of people from Provincetown to Dennis who have been functioning with restaurants, and there are a lot of success stories out there. A lot of thinking out of the box. They've gotten creative. They've found a way to make something work for themselves and to make some money. Everybody's going to be going home with less this summer. We know that. But it's important that we do support the people and try and give them something to go home with. I also think, and I've thought this from the very beginning, as soon as COVID became, part of my daily vocabulary, I realized very quickly that this was going to be a regional. It's regional. The virus itself doesn't stop at a town line. It's something that we've all got to be dealing with on a regional basis. But again, we'll get through this, and I'm hopeful that we'll again have a muted summer and not have so far so good, and fingers crossed that we can continue to Labor Day. Again, thank you for all the work that you're doing. Not an easy place to be right now. I get that. And see you later. Bye.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for your service and your leadership.
Yeah, Kathleen, thank you. And good luck in your next venture. We'll miss you. And when is Wellfleet Election Day? It keeps getting pushed
June
back,
15th.
right? June 15th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, Justina Carlson.
Hi, Julian. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for coming tonight. And I'm sure you guys have been working really hard. But I have a few hard-hitting things to say. I don't think hoping that people don't come is a strategy. Julian, you said you think that our infrastructure is fine. I know our police are down 5 summer cops and down 2 regular cops. And they had some problems last year with beach control. So they've got some challenges. Our fire is down 2 full-time positions, which includes an EMT. And I'm going to mention that our health department is only 2 people. And I'm bringing this up because we have 700 to 1,000 short-term rentals in Wellfleet alone. They're unlicensed, they're not inspected, and there'll be varying degrees of ability to cope with the cleaning protocol. So when we say we have industry standards, it is a uniquely difficult, rental situation to control. And I think that our counterparts in Eastham, Truro, and other Outer Cape towns are very concerned with the seasonal spike in population. It's I'm sure you know these numbers, but 3,000 to 18,000 in Wellfleet alone. And with the three towns I mentioned, Truro, Eastham, and Wellfleet, it's 70,000 people coming from, that's in a normal year. That doesn't mean we'll get them this year, but because they drive, because 97% of our renters drive, they're coming from the national hotspots of Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And the Wellfleet Select Board has discussed short-term rentals and reached out to our select board counterparts in other Outer Cape towns. And I think there's a simple, quick fix, which is that if we tweaked the short-term rental period to 14 days, we'd be able to cut in half the number of visitors, that potentially infected visitors that come. At the same time, give business owners the right to make money, to get out there and just get 2-week rental sold instead of 1 week, and do a big public health service. And again, these are unregulated and uninspected rentals. So it seems to me that if 14 days for the Outer Cape might be safer, given the challenges our infrastructure has, given that we don't have enforcement mechanisms for cleanliness, and given that the tourists come from hotspots. So you'll be hearing more from us. But Julian, when you said that you wouldn't support this, I hope that maybe a small.
I can clarify. I'll clarify
Yeah.
all of this if you want. I just
Yeah.
it's and my prior comments. I mean, this is the 15th of these I've done. I've never worked
and I
harder
didn't
in my
mean to
life
jump
than I'm
on
doing
you.
right now. No. It's like and I actually try to be very careful with my words, because actually my job right now is a public communicator, and there's a lot of scrutiny on all of us as leaders, right? And so we've all been
Sure.
cautious on that. First and foremost, on the local, particularly health infrastructure, from like week 2 on this, I have been raising to my colleagues the need for us to really support local health infrastructure. One of the really big challenges in this pandemic is that Massachusetts local health, by individual health authorities, that's 351 distinct municipalities with amazing local health staff, but they're woefully under-resourced. I'm trying to get more dollars and resources for them. I think that's crucially important. I think let's walk through. There's been a lot of conversation. I think it's important to talk about this sort of short-term rental piece. There's a number of considerations that y'all are going to need to really consider. And I think town council needs to be consulted, very soon if you're going to go down this route. But that, distinguishing between leisure accommodations is likely to land the town or the towns in litigation. It just is distinguishing between. So I think that I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an epidemiologist, but I'm going to talk about sort of both these things. I'm going to refer you to talk to lawyers and epidemiologists. But I think we've got to treat, leisure accommodations. It seems that the governor is going to be treating them consistently under the plan. And so that, that would need, if you're going to have a 14-day minimum, that would need to apply sort of across the board, right? I think from an epidemiological perspective, I think really having really good data around the difference between a 2-week stay and a 3-day stay or a 5-day stay or sort of a week stay, I think is also crucially important. I'll also note that leisure accommodations only sort of applies to rentals that are basically 31 days or less. So if you're renting, and a number of folks have sort of tried to actually rent and are renting places for a month or 2 months or for sort of the whole season now, those are actually not considered leisure accommodations. They're considered a rental, like you're renting an apartment. So I think those are sort of the considerations that are there. I'm hard pressed, and I appreciate your comments and all these comments and all of us. None of us, my understanding of your background, of all of our backgrounds here, have a background in epidemiology or infectious disease, all these sort of pieces. So I think the town would really need to consult, really consult expertise on this. And I just think that, to be frank, I think that the town, you don't have the expertise. We don't have the expertise. We need to rely on the Department of Public Health. We need to rely on Governor Baker, who not only has, who not only has the resources of the Commonwealth, but arguably, we probably have the strongest, best health medical sector in the Commonwealth, in the country. And so what I really worry about is the inconsistency of it. And so, if Wellfleet bans short-term rentals, but Truro and Eastham don't, or even if the Outer Cape does, or has some sort of prohibition, you're still going to have lines at PJs, right? People are still going to kind of come here and come up here. Most of the traffic that I've been seeing out here actually are day trippers, people who are sort of taking a day, to come out here. So, I understand sort of rationally why some folks have sort of latched on to saying, hey, if we just provide a minimum on short-term rentals and it has to be sort of for 2 weeks, it seems like a simple solution. And I just would really urge you folks to really interrogate it. What I won't support is I won't support towns going their own way. So any of this would have to have a regional approach. I'd argue regional is actually not just Outer Cape. People see this place as Cape Cod. I like to see this place as the Outer Cape or just Provincetown, Truro, and Wellfleet, or Eastham. But in truth, people see this place as Cape Cod, and I worry about inconsistency. Let's use a different example: masks. Before the governor put a universal mask policy in place, I could not keep track of where I had to wear a mask in my district and where I didn't have to wear a mask in my district. That lack of understanding is where you deal with issues around compliance. It's where you deal with issues around adherence. So I think from a public health perspective, we've got to have a universal set of policies as a region. And if we want to figure out, and if towns want to figure out as a region, a regional approach to that, that's fine. But I think, unilateral action by the towns is just not the way to go. Frankly, I'm not very confident the towns have the ability to implement something like that. I've worked through these issues extensively, particularly on both islands, on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, sought to go sort of further than what the governor did relative to a construction ban and a landscaping ban. That had the support of Martha's Vineyard Hospital, Nantucket Cottage Hospital, had doctors and epidemiologists sort of supporting that decision. So, I think before this sort of conversation goes further, I'd really advise the town and other towns to get, Cape Cod Healthcare's opinion on this, Outer Cape Health Services opinion, other expertise that we can bring in. So this can be really grounded in public health. And frankly, if this is a route that towns go, so you have a case that'll stand up in court, because that's where it's going to go.
Thank you.
So I wanted to sort of give some context and walk that through there. That's why I'm so cautionary about unilateral action by the town, because I've seen this movie before on the islands, and I know how difficult and how frustrating it is, and ultimately becomes very confusing, confusing for the public. With the construction ban on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, we fought like hell to get it. There's a lot of good reasons that if you want to hear about later, I'll go into, of why we pushed for it. But then as the ban continued, there was a tremendous amount of political pressure, particularly on Martha's Vineyard, which is one island but 6 towns. Edgartown wanted to lift the ban like early, but West Tisbury didn't, and Oak Bluffs was going to do it on a different day. Well, most contractors who on Martha's Vineyard are, many of whom are immigrant folks or English as a second language, don't distinguish between Edgartown and Oak Bluffs, just like most people actually don't really distinguish in their practices between Truro and Wellfleet or Harwich. And so that's why I'm so forceful about that recommendation, because I've been through it and I've seen that it's difficult. And at the end of the day, there was a lot of confusion on the islands around a construction ban, because frankly, the towns couldn't hang in, and they frankly couldn't take the political pressure that was being put against them from the construction industry. Having seen this before, this is what I would suspect would happen, and I recommend strongly against unilateral action. And I think as a region, if we're going to go that route, let's make sure that's grounded in health, in science, and go that route.
Thanks, Julian.
Of course, thank you.
Miss Helen Miranda Wilson is the last one.
Yeah, okay, there's a lot to be said about what's just been said, but I've had a question that hasn't been touched on. So even as we speak all across the nation and here on the Cape, people are getting more and more used to Zoom meetings. We have scheduled our town meeting for October 5th. It's going to happen after our special election, never mind, everything's kaflooey. But is the state considering, I hope, some legislative option for us to have a Zoom meeting for town meeting, or other options, perhaps write-in? That's more problematic for me. But the other day, and Sarah and Julian, you probably heard about this, there was a really pretty decent forum in Chatham about short-term rentals. There were 400 people there. I am not sure, from everything I read about this virus, including as much science as I can bear every day, I'm not sure that we are going to be in a place to have a safe town meeting in person on October 5th. And we're hearing more and more that that's a very good possibility, even with a reduced quorum. At this point, and remember, this is a moving target for all of us. So I'm not complaining that the legislature hasn't put it on the table yet, but I'm bringing it up because I hope that you will do everything in your power to have that in the toolbox for having town meeting for the municipalities here. Because having a reduced quorum and yet they're all still in the same room. I'm 72, I have a heart condition, etc. A lot of seniors here, a lot of them show up at our meetings. And for the town to be able to say, okay, here's where we are. We're going to have the meeting on October 5th. We're sending out the warrant, but we're going to have it electronically because it's just not safe to have that many people in a room, and having people in separate rooms if there's been a surge. Even 10 people in a room that isn't heavily ventilated in October, we're not going to have windows open. That's risky if you read about the aerosol line.
Right. So
And
Helen,
hold on,
go ahead.
people are stationary and they're there for an entire meeting. So even if you just have 10 people, I wouldn't do that. And I'm not a germaphobe. Thank you.
So as you know, your town manager, soon to be former town manager, emailed the senator and me about this very issue probably a month ago, I think it is by now. You know, this is the beauty of working from home. You don't have to spend time commuting to get from point A to point B, but the days all do blur together. So who knows how long ago it was that Dan emailed us, but a while ago. Yes, that is on the table. Mail-in voting is on the table. I would say that it is all on the table. The speaker has just put together a working group on, in effect, reopening, and it's not just looking at the economic side, but in particular municipalities. The chair of the Joint Committee on, the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Education reached out to me today, and I reached out to the superintendents of schools in my district to have a Zoom meeting next week to talk about what they're looking at and how schools are going to reopen, what that looks like, what support they need. So all this is by way of saying that we are keenly aware of this. I think Julian and I face somewhat of a challenge in that there are a lot of our colleagues who come from a community that has a mayor form of government or a town council form of government or a representative town meeting form of government. So this notion of 350 people in a room from a community that is of a population of 3,000 people, my Boston colleagues or my colleagues from Brockton or Worcester or even Wellesley look at me like I have two heads. Oh, what do you mean there's going to be 300 people there? Well, of course there's going to be 300 people there. So we are doing our best to elevate this issue. I think your concerns are right. The other thing is, even if we have the go-ahead that you could have 300 people in a room, but because of people's fear of infection, it has a chilling effect on attendance, and you could have a more robust debate doing it remotely. I think that this is my personal opinion, and this is what I'm going to try to sell up in Boston, is that communities should have that option to have the robust debate, to do it via, Zoom, Meets, Google Chat, whatever the online platforms are that the individual community might choose to choose to hold the town meeting that way. So we don't have an answer for you yet. I feel like the legislatures, we've just turned the corner where we're able to think about things in a future state, as opposed to, we need to enact this legislation now because the treasurer has to do short-term borrowing because of the tax filing deadline being moved, or we have to do this, kind of in crisis mode. We're now able to do things in forward thinking mode. And this business of making sure that town government can continue to run and continue to function, probably because I'm a former select board member myself, is right at the top of my list.
Yeah, quick point, one more quick point.
Yeah.
Not mentioned yet. One of the reasons I did not vote to send a letter requesting an extension of short-term rentals to the governor, and also was the only person on our board who participating in the survey that, I don't know if you know, that M.A. Ekman and Eastham did a survey of, yes, okay, you know about that. Here's the thing. I also used to do changeovers. I'm very impressed that anybody could do 8 in one day. I couldn't even do that in my 20s with a partner. But here's the thing. I have been on this place for my whole life. And in my experience, people that rent for a month, people even that rent for a week, and they all cry about it after, always have people come and stay with them. So I don't believe that this is, having no short-term rentals is actually an efficient way of limiting the number of people that come through a unit. Plus, very often people have friends come and visit. So the traffic, I don't think, is reduced in a guaranteed way at all if you don't have short-term rentals. I think, in fact, how many times have people renting for a month sublet? These are friends that come up here, and they rent a week to one friend, all with the permission of the property owner. But I don't think it's
or not.
Or
Or
yeah.
not.
No, Helen, that's it.
Yeah, and so that's a good point also. Yeah, we don't want to do anything that drives anything underground, because I think, I hope, what I've been talking about is, I hope that when leisure accommodations open, there will be guidelines that are pretty strict around contact tracing. Right now, somebody may have on their lease the name of the person who signed that lease, but if it's a 3-bedroom house and it can have 6 people, I think that we're going to have to collect the names and contact information of all six people. There's going to be guidelines like that that are put into place for restaurants. We see it in other states. I mean, there's not a lot of this that we have to make up uniquely, because we could look at California or New York or Connecticut and what they're doing around this contact tracing issue. So Helen, I think your point is very well taken. And we want to make sure that the unintended consequence of driving an underground economy doesn't impair the good public health work that we're seeking to do.
I would also add, this is actually something I learned through this process, that according to the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, the #1 place that people who come to Cape Cod stay is actually with friends and family. And so, I think from a volume perspective, that was something I didn't know, actually. Had you asked me earlier, I'd have said something different. But the other piece on the voting piece too, Helen, make sure you folks chime into the Mass Municipal Association, because we've raised these issues. Yeah. I think initially there were some concerns from the Mass Municipal Association that sort of small towns sort of couldn't, navigate some of these technical needs, or that the potential participation would be so great. That's actually not true. The technology can handle it. But I think weighing in with Mass Municipal Association, they'd be an important ally there. My sense is that they've been at the negotiating table. I think we've passed 3 municipalities bills. There's more to come. But making sure Mass Municipal Association hears from you. I think Sarah's totally right. I think any tool a town wants to use to conduct, the business of the people, you should have it right now. And I think actually going forward, there's a lot of ways that we've changed how we do business that may also stick around, which may be a benefit. Getting Sarah and I to be at the same select board meeting in person would have been is a scheduling feat. Doing this is this is easy in comparison, at least logistically. So thank you so much. It's so good to be with all of you, and thank you for, your leadership and your partnership. This is just, there couldn't be a more difficult time, and what's brought kind of the most hope to me is to see how, as a community, as an Outer Cape, we've just really rallied and are taking care of one another, and I think there's a lot of very special, encouraging things that have happened in a really difficult, hardest of hard situations. So thank you for being a part of that and for your time.
Well, thank you. And Sarah, if Sarah wants to say anything, but this is a very complex situation. And it's great to see that or hear that they've all been mentioned tonight. Short-term rentals is really complex, restaurants, people who visit us. We're getting a lot of data here, and I have total faith and trust both you and Sarah to carry our ideas forward and to communicate well, as you both always have.
Just know you don't have to go it alone. This is, the beginning of many conversations around this. And thank you guys for being so generous with your time tonight. We'll see everybody soon.
Thank you.
All
Take
right.
care.
Yeah. Bye-bye. So moving on, I'm going to change things up a little bit on the agenda to move on to board and committee appointments and updates, and then we'll move on to the town administrator search presentation. Wait, I should do the town administrator search presentation. Is Mr. Lynch still here?
Yes, he is.
Okay, so we'll let him go. Maybe Harry can go too or something. I don't know if you're there for that in particular. But yes, Mr. Lynch, do you want to do a presentation or an update? Or does Mr. Turkanian?
Sure. Harry, would you like to say some opening comments?
Yes, very, very briefly, if I can be unmuted. Yeah, I guess I am.
You are. You're good.
I just want to let the board know, we will file a final report that details the process we went through, just so there will be transparency. But we did conduct 7 interviews. We did select 3 candidates and requested Mr. Lynch's firm to conduct background checks. One of those individuals accepted another position and is no longer in contention. We met last Friday to consider whether we should modify our selection, and decided not to. And so with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Lynch to do a presentation on the candidates that the committee is recommending to the board for further consideration.
Thank you.
And I am going to, first off, let me thank you for having us on your meeting tonight. I know you have a lot on your plate and some very important topics to discuss. And so appreciate you putting this on. Obviously, this is also an important action for the town to take. I'm going to try to put a PowerPoint, a very quick PowerPoint up on your screen so that I can walk you through the process and what our report is. And hopefully this will work.
It's up, Bernie.
Is it up?
Yep.
All right. Again, we were chosen by the town to assist with the search process, and I'm happy to say that you appointed a very good screening committee that was very helpful in working with us and they held our feet to the fire certainly throughout the entire process. And I think we have a couple of outstanding candidates for you. By way of background, we finalized and the board approved the position statement back on March 24th. We went right out into the market pretty much right out the next day or so with posting it on the MMA and the ICMA websites, doing our own posting that we do with a number of colleges and universities that have alumni boards, and started actively recruiting people. We have a network, as we told you when we came out to meet with you, right before you chose us to help you with this search. We have a network of literally hundreds of people that we reach out to, and we let them know about this position. So we had a deadline for applications of April 27th. Initially had set it up, I think, for April 20th, but we extended that a little bit because as we all know, that was really the situation was really unfolding with the pandemic, that we felt we needed to add a few more days to give people an opportunity to apply. We held a meeting with the screening committee on April 23rd. We went over the process, and Harry was appointed or elected as the chair. We set up our calendar. At the end of it all, we had 39 applications, which is a very high number of applications, particularly in the current circumstances. Most of the recruitments that we have been doing have 25 to 35 applications that we receive. In the case of Wellfleet, we almost got to the 40 number. So we were pleased with that. And I felt that we had a number of very strong candidates. So we actually, we sat down, we went through these with the screening committee. There were 8 actually chosen for an interview. By the time we got to the interviews on the 11th and 12th, one of our semifinalists had withdrawn, leaving us at 7. And as Harry has just indicated, we chose 3 finalists, or the screening committee did, and then we ultimately had one withdrawal, and that brings us to us tonight with this referral of the 2 finalists to you, which the committee approved on May 22nd. When we conducted the interviews with the screening committee, we worked jointly with the screening committee on the appropriate mix of questions. We utilized really a format of a dialogue with the candidates, with a facilitated discussion with the screening committee weighing in and asking their questions and drilling down into the experience and backgrounds of the candidates. We began obviously with an overview from the candidates as to their careers and what their goals were, and explaining to us what their level of interest was in the town of Wellfleet, why they were interested in the town of Wellfleet. It was also a priority of the screening committee to raise the issue of COVID-19, to talk to the candidates, to get their understanding and of the scope of the issue that a town like Wellfleet would be dealing with, particularly focusing on some of the financial issues, but obviously the public health and public safety issues as well. We discussed personnel management style, leadership style. We discussed goal setting and how do they work with the board, and how they work with their departments in setting goals. Spent considerable time talking about economic development, particularly diversifying the economy, and doing so in a way that maintained the character of the community. Housing, of course, is a major issue in the Outer Cape, so we spent some time talking to them about that and their understanding of those issues. Likewise, environmental protection, coastal resilience, the natural resources of Wellfleet were discussed to get some sense of their background with and their familiarity, particularly with those types of coastal issues. A key component of the Wellfleet town administrator position is municipal finance, so we spend a considerable amount of time talking to them about that. Understanding their experience with managing large projects, how they build relationships within the community and with outside of the community with regional efforts. Obviously, the most important relationship that a town administrator has is a relationship with the select board. So we spent a little bit of time trying to understand that, and then we took up their questions. So that gives you a scope of the type of discussion, dialogue, conversation that we have with each one of the candidates that were interviewed over the span of about 75 minutes each. The first candidate that I want to present to you is Maria Broadbent. Maria has her MPA from the University of Rhode Island, Master's degree in Public Administration. She has a BS in Environmental Science from Unity College. She has, and I will note that I have forwarded on to Courtney the full packet that includes, for each one of these finalists, that includes their cover letter, their resume, as well as a reference report, which summarizes the comments that were received from their references. I should also note that we did conduct a core check of these candidates, and they are both clear. In terms of experience, I'm listing really just their 2 or 3 most recent. They each have, I think, some minor positions they held for short periods of time, but these really gives you a sense of the important parts of their careers. So in Maria's case, she's currently the town manager of Berwyn Heights, Maryland, a suburb outside of DC. She's been there for almost 2 years. She is interested in relocating to the Cape. That is a focus of her efforts right now, is to get back up to the Massachusetts, and specifically the Cape, having spent time working for the park many years ago, and fell in love with the area and wants to be part of the Outer Cape area. So she'd like to use her town manager experience to come back up this way. Prior to going to Berwyn Heights, she worked for the city of Annapolis, Maryland, for 2 years as the Director of Office of Environmental Policy, for 6 years as the Director of Neighborhood and Environmental Programs, and for 2 years as the Environmental Program Coordinator. Prior to that, she worked for Newport, Rhode Island as the Clean City Program Coordinator. So she also spent some time working in the state of Maine on some environmental issues. So she is familiar certainly with the New England area and familiar with the town meeting form of government, having participated in that when she was working in Maine. The reference feedback that we have on Maria, speaking with her references, they described her as being intelligent, creative, and professional, persuasive. She can inspire. She listens, empathetic, confident. She has strong budget and negotiation skills. She is collaborative. She supports volunteers and community stakeholders. And specifically, we spoke with the couple of people that were in different community organizations that she had worked with, and the mayor of Annapolis that spoke very highly of the work that she did for the city and the community efforts that she participated in and led. One person did indicate that she'd take the hits to do what's right. She's straightforward and always respectful to the people she's dealing with. And as you can see by her resume, she has very strong background in issues of sustainability, environmental protection, particularly when she was working in, obviously when she was working in Annapolis, but and also her time in Newport, Rhode Island. The second finalist that we have is Sean Mcguinness. Sean has a master's degree in business administration from Suffolk University and a BS in civil engineering from the University of Massachusetts at Lowell. His experience, she's currently coming up on 2 years with the town of Dartmouth as their town administrator. And prior to that, he worked for approximately 18 years for the town of Yarmouth. Initially as a director of information technology for approximately 15 years, and then grew that into the municipal operations director for a period of 3 years. In the municipal operations director position, he was involved in all aspects of municipal government, best described really as chief operating officer, or certainly a deputy to the manager in Yarmouth. So again, strong background from the Cape, knows Cape issues, and is again interested in heading down to and working down the Outer Cape, and again, as part of his career plan is to do that. So this position ties in nicely with that. His reference feedback, so that again, as you would imagine, with the variety of scope that he's worked in, a diverse set of skills that were described to us in technology, engineering, wastewater, general municipal government, that he can wear multiple hats. His position really grew in Yarmouth as he would take on more and more responsibilities. People cited his strong financial skills and collective bargaining. Financial skills are in terms of operation as well as capital. Collaborative, team builder, motivator, leads through influence, has a sense of humor, and calm and decisive at all times. Really a very good manager of people, and also just highlighting very much an open communication. He tries to be very transparent in his relations with the board and with the people of the town, and strategic in the way he goes about his work. So those are our two finalists. Again, both very strong. I think and Harry can back me up if need be on this. I think the committee was very impressed with both of those candidates. I think that we had a third that we also was equally impressive, who chose to take a different position outside of municipal government. I think those two rose to the top, along with the third, very quickly with the committee. So
Yeah, if I could just chime in very briefly, all three of the candidates that the committee selected were unanimous top tier choices. There was no dissenting opinions within the committee.
So our next steps, and I'm happy to take questions and comments, but our next steps are to set an interview date, to discuss an interview process, and I think the board already has some ideas as to how that's going to unfold, and then we'd be happy to work with the board, and we can do that offline, working to craft some questions and discussion points with you, and hoping to do that. So that is my report.
Great, thank you. So I haven't talked to the board. I've talked to Mr. Hort that if you and the candidates with COVID-19 think it would be all right to, I emailed you this today,
Yes.
to meet at our Council on Aging, the 5 select board members, you, the screening, no, it wouldn't be, it would just be you and the candidates.
Correct.
Maybe not even you. I gotta think about that. And if it's all right with the board, we could agree. I think everybody would want to meet in person, the candidates. So we can discuss this more later if it goes on, but does everybody think that meeting at the Council on Aging in the big room with social distancing is an all right idea?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Hi. My question that is directly relevant to my answer is, where do these two people come from? In other words, how far will they be
Ron,
driving?
did you hear what I just said? They're gonna come for an interview.
No, I heard all that, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Lynch or to Harry.
Right.
Where are these two candidates, finalists, located now? Where will they be driving from?
One will be driving from from Sandwich. Mr. Mcguinness lives in Sandwich, and Ms. Broadbent lives in Maryland, and
Indianapolis.
right in Annapolis.
Yes.
Right. And I do think that she'd be willing to come for an interview, but that's where they live.
My point, Madam Chair, and to the rest of the board is, of course, it would be better to meet somebody in person, but not if we're asking them to go on a long trip where it's really a hazard to make a pit stop if you need to go to the bathroom. That really is, how many times have I heard that from people in the last month? A lot. And I would be just as happy to have a Zoom meeting if it didn't prejudice the person. I mean, in other words, I feel it would be more considerate to have a Zoom meeting. I would not want to have an in-person interview with one person and a Zoom interview with other person, because I think that would skew the odds for the person who wasn't actually here. I would be willing to meet at the COA if the staff, as Janet said, was willing. If there were really only, say, 7 or 8 people in the room, widely spaced with masks. Because remember, we're not only exposing ourselves, which we do anyway if we go to Stop and Shop, but we're exposing the person who has come in. And I just think we can't be too careful about it. And showing consideration in this situation, I think, is paramount. So I'd be willing to do it if it really was limited to those few people. And whoever was getting a video of us interviewing the two candidates.
Right. Okay. So we can discuss the details, but how does the rest of the board feel about meeting if the one candidate from Maryland can come up here? How does the rest of the board feel about meeting in person at the COA with social distancing, obviously?
Madam Chair.
Anything else on that, Mike?
I mean, I think it's an important job, and I think getting a feel for someone in person is important in this type of situation. I mean, I just you can have online conversations, and that's great, and you'll get some sense of it. But we all know how important it is to actually get a sense of a person from meeting them and in person. And so I think it's important if we can do it. I'm wondering if we have to even meet inside a building. I mean, is that necessary? Is there someplace outside we could meet? And then that complicate things? I don't know. But I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, the weather's been pretty good. So.
I was thinking with Mia Baumgarten doing the recording, it's all set up, and it would be a good recording in the meeting room at the COA. But we'll start. We don't have to discuss all the details, but as long as you like the idea of meeting them in person. Who else wants to weigh in on this? Just Kathleen? Actually,
Justina had her hand up.
go ahead.
Yeah, I hate to be a party pooper, but I'm not comfortable with it. And I think if we wear masks, then it's awkward. I feel I get a sense of a person on Zoom, and I'm not willing to compromise, put myself into a situation in an enclosed space that isn't, medically necessary. I wish this virus was different, but I think that the Zoom is a good medium and can certainly the search committee had to make its decisions based on Zoom. And the whole mask things will make the meeting. I mean, is the candidate going to wear the mask and so forth? So I haven't measured out the CA, the Council on Aging room, but the 6 feet of social distancing is only one metric, and your risk goes up the longer you're in an enclosed space. And if there's excited speaking, there was a singer one infected singer got something like 60 choir members ill because the singing was an exhalation of more force and breath. So I personally am not comfortable, and I'm sorry. And certainly the show can go on without me, but I would commit to a Zoom format.
Janice, Kathleen, may I weigh in?
Sort of. I don't think you're going to be around. Are you going to be around? But yeah.
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to suggest that possibly bring the 2 candidates, for the select board meeting scheduled June the 9th, and not just meet with us, but to meet with everybody, and we could get a feel for them that way. I don't feel that I understand Helen and Justina concern with meeting in an enclosed space. I think we could all get a feel for the 2 candidates on a Zoom meeting. So if you want to have something before June the 9th or June the 9th, I will be here.
Okay, that's going to be up to the candidates and Mr. Lynch and Mr. Turkanian, I would think, for the date. We could also do both. We can do it from the COA and then also have it be on Zoom meeting, because it is open to the public, but I didn't want it in person with the whole public. but Justina could watch it and Helen could watch it on Zoom.
Thank you, Jen.
Madam-
Yeah. So
Okay.
we'll please everyone. And we have to also ask the candidates if they want to come up. We still, that's up to them too. So, okay, I just wanted to get a feel for that. This is nothing we need to be talk about a lot. Ms. Lynch, did you suggest a date or a general week or anything?
I did not. I'm looking at the 9th. The 9th is a day that would work. If you wanted to try to do something during the day on the the week before, maybe on either Thursday or Friday of that day, of that week, the 4th or 5th. So I think looking that far out, 4th, 5th, 8th, 9th are all good dates, I think.
Harry has his hand up, Janet.
Yes,
I just would note that to the extent I participate, it may have to be remotely because I may in fact actually be in Annapolis.
Lucky you. Are you going to be sailing?
No, I have some family things I have to take care of, and my daughter lives down there.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can pass around some emails and seeing what dates are good.
Madam
And
Chair,
yes, well, anyhow, yeah. All right. Go ahead, Helen.
thank you. I want to remind you, I brought this up the first time we discussed this. It is key that we interview these two candidates as soon as possible, even if we have to have a special meeting for it, because of something I and other people experienced, which is some good candidates, thoroughly vetted, who the select board didn't get on the stick about, and they, filtered off. I definitely think we should include Kathleen simply because she's been with it the whole time. This is, Kathleen, not something personal, but simply, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're on the board. I'm not saying that. I'm not. But you have been part of this process, and you should get to, and you've been working with Dan Horde, and I think you should definitely be in on this vote. The other thing is, I feel that we all, and the candidates also, both of them should be on Zoom, and all 5 of us should be to the same degree present. In other words, I would not like to attend a meeting where 3 of you or 2 of you or whatever were in an actual room and I was on Zoom. I don't think that works well. And the key thing about Zoom right now is it is an active consideration for one of these people who we hope will be our town administrator, that they, whatever their feelings about COVID-19, would not be exposed. They've surely been on tons of Zoom meetings themselves in the last months. And they could attend so much more readily. We could get a date with them so much more quickly if one of them didn't have to drive from Annapolis, frankly. And I just think we should do it by Zoom, and we should restrict participation, although it's going to be an open meeting, and keep it clean and keep it simple and ask a lot of questions and do it as soon as possible, and to decide tonight what that date is so that these people can know when we're going to see them. I don't think we should bounce it to the next meeting. I absolutely don't. I think we should decide tonight.
I mean, we could, sorry, Madam Chair, it's 9:15. We can decide via email and
Right.
do it then, and we would have to post it and all that. So we need to do that. But perhaps we can talk with Bernie and Harry, and they can get in contact and figure out good times and stuff.
Right.
We can't do it now, Madam Chair.
Because we all don't have our calendars, Helen, and we don't have their calendars, the candidates.
Yeah, you have to ask the candidates what's appropriate for them. If so we'll Courtney will send around an email saying what days and times are good for everyone, and we can all answer it tomorrow and then set it up.
And also, are we going to include something which staff has requested and which actually was very effective in the select board getting to know who the candidates were last couple of times around, When can staff interview the candidates? In other words, there are actually 3 interview sessions. Last time staff interviewed the candidates in 2 separate groups. Maybe that wouldn't be necessary now. And then the select board interviewed the candidates. And then the select board very soon after that made a decision. So the candidates weren't hanging there.
Yeah, I think if I could, I think that that's something that, again, once we set up the date, we can kind of work off of that to see what we could do a Zoom meeting with the department heads to have them participate in a discussion.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I've changed my mind listening to Helen and the rest of the board, and I think a Zoom meeting probably is the most appropriate thing to do under the current circumstances, especially because one of them is coming from Maryland. And then the other thing, I just had a quick question for Bernard, for Mr. Takanian about the selection process. When the third selection had withdrawn, was there not someone in a close third that you guys felt like you wanted to bring up, or was it clear to you that the 2 were well ahead of the pack?
If I can speak to that, we learned of the fact of the withdrawal on May 20th, last Wednesday. We had a posted meeting scheduled for last Friday at 4 p.m. And we met and discussed that, and we discussed whether we should supplement the remaining 2 with a third person. But the clear consensus of the committee was not to do that. That the 3 that we had originally selected were, in our view, significantly better candidates for Wellfleet than the other 4 that we interviewed.
Okay, that's good enough. I just was curious about the process.
Nope, we thought about that.
Okay, so Courtney will send around and communicate with Mr. Lynch and Mr. Takanian about the process and who'll be on and where we'll do it. Okay?
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you guys a lot. It's a hard job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're now going to move on to the board committee appointments and updates. And then we'll talk about COVID-19 afterwards. So we have the first appointment is Nancy Behrens to the Taxation Aid Committee. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
I move to appoint Nancy Behrens to the Taxation Aid Committee for a term
Helen,
ending. Sorry,
sorry.
starting again. I move to appoint Nancy Behrens to the Taxation Aid Committee for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Helen, second.
All in favor?
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Christina, I.
Michael, aye.
And Janet, I. Motion passes unanimously. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to appointment of Carolyn Rogers to the Cultural Council. Any questions? Concerns?
Madam Chair, I move to appoint Carolyn Roger to the Cultural Council for a term ending June 30th, 2023, for a one-year term for the first term, sorry.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Christina, I.
Michael, aye.
And Janet, I. Motion passes unanimously. And now moving on to the appointment of James Falcone to the Natural Resource Advisory Board. Any questions, concerns, comments?
Madam Chair, I move to appoint James Falcone to the Natural Resources Advisory Board for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Second,
Second,
All in favor, say,
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Justina, I.
Michael, I.
and Janet, I. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. So then moving on to the first vote is to increase the membership size of the dredging task force from 5 to 7 members. Any questions or discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just please have the charge changed on the website if we vote to do this. We've already
Okay.
discussed it quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to increase the membership of the dredging task force from 5 to 7 members.
Helen,
Michael,
I.
second.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay, Michael seconded. Vote then, please. All in favor?
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Justina, I.
Michael, I.
And Janet, I. And now, so we have 3 candidates, but this all came about because Joe Aberdale was asked to be back on the dredging task force, and he has a very good amount of history and knowledge of dredging and funding and all the permits. So can I have a motion to appoint Joe Aberdale to the dredging task force?
Madam Chair, I move to appoint Joe Aberdale to the dredging task force for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Helen, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Justina, I.
Michael, I.
And Janet, I. Motion passes. So we have the 2 other candidates, Kevin Coakley and John Wolf. And we did get, both are very qualified. I'm very impressed with what John's resume. I never knew that about him. We did get a letter from, did everybody get the letter from our assistant harbor master saying
Yes.
that they support Kevin Coakley for this position? Did everyone get that email?
Yes, Madam Chair, I got that letter.
I got that letter.
Okay.
Yes, me too.
Right. So because the assistant harbor master kind of weighed in on this, I would think Kevin Coakley, and he too had a very good qualifying application. I would suggest we appoint Kevin Coakley, but I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, may we have a discussion first?
Sure.
Thank you. So both John, Mr. Wolf, and Mr. Coakley are charter boat. They have charter boats. My understanding from Mr. Coakley's resume is that he has he been previously on the Marina Advisory Committee?
So let me look here for a second.
No, I don't think
I
so.
know that the dredging committee also wanted
Yeah.
him in, well, you have his application in front of you, right?
Yes. And
So
I don't see that he was on the Marina Advisory. Okay, now here's the thing. If you're a charter, if you're on the dredging committee and you are a charter boat captain and you're going to benefit directly from the dredging, as will many other people, there needs to be some thought weighing the expertise that such a person brings, which is very much needed, and the fact that they will benefit financially way more from dredging than, say, I will, or anybody that doesn't boat or fish, arguably. I think that it benefits a great deal of the town, but I'm just bringing it up here because it's a conflict of interest issue. I don't think it's a serious one. There's no direct payment or, salary earned or anything, but these people could also function very well from the audience. That said, we did get a recommendation for Joe and for Kevin, from Mr. Coakley and Mr. Aberdale, not from John Wolf, simply perhaps because he'd applied late. And I'd like to know if that's why. Did the marina, the people at the marina, the person who wrote the letter to us, Mr. Sullivan, was he aware that John Wolf had applied? There's my question. I brought up all things.
Yes, so John Wolf did not apply late. His application, he got his application in, I don't know, last week sometime, but it was in the back. I don't know, Courtney can explain this, that we knew he was applying, but his application form got not lost, but just delayed because it was in the back mailbox. But he applied and we knew about it.
He had asked at a former meeting if he could be considered, and then he had put his application in the back mailbox at Town Hall, and it didn't get put on my desk. And so it was just, but we've had people apply before and there's been no application paper in there. So, but John did ask to be considered. So we've got his application that was sent to you today.
Yes. And Madam Chair, so we didn't know about it, but the office did. So, okay, I get it. Thank you for clarifying that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to quickly respond to Helen's comment about a potential conflict of interest. I think the way we usually handle that is to go to the lawyer of the day and to fill out the appropriate forms.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yep.
I'm just raising it because we're discussing their candidacy.
Sure, it crossed my mind too. But then I thought, if he's on the water, he knows the conditions, and it's an asset as well as the concerns that you raised, Helen. So then I thought, well, it can be dealt with in the usual manner.
Yeah.
And I believe that he's been a captain for a long time. I might even say 20 years. I'm not looking at his application. And Assistant Harbor Master said he has really good knowledge of the harbor, the silt, the dredging, and everything. So he's been around. So, yeah. So may I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have that screen up. Okay.
Madam Chair, I'm in support of John Wolf for the dredging task force. And John is here tonight to make his case, but I've known John for a long time. He's a real stand-up guy. He's well-spoken. He also is very familiar with the harbor and the channel. And he's been a very valid or valued member of the Marina Advisory Committee. But above and beyond that, John stands out to me tonight for nothing that has to do with the water or the harbor. He stands out for me tonight because way ahead of this COVID-19 crisis, John has a neighbor, has a humanitarian, helped out an individual here in Wellfleet that I don't want to go into right now, that was far and above what any good neighbor would do for somebody. I really would like to support John in this position for the dredging task force. It's a very important position for him. He can speak to it himself, but I'm in support of John this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I think both John and Kevin Coakley are still at the meeting, so we could hear from John if Courtney wants to unmute him, if he's there, and then we'll hear from Mr. Coakley.
Yes, I'm here.
So do you want to say anything about why you want to be on the dredging task force?
Sure. As I pointed out in the application, I've not only got almost 11 years as a charter sailboat captain in the harbor, but I've sailed these waters since I was about 7 years old. And I don't want to go into how many years that is, but it's a lot. And I have also, I don't make any pretense at being an expert on dredging. But what I will say is that I know how to listen and I know how to research and look things up. And in my the several years I've been on the Marina Advisory Committee, I have done so. Made trips to Washington to talk to our congressman on behalf of funding for the dredging and so forth. And that's about it. I'm not sure. I don't feel like I'm in competition with anybody. I'm sure Mr. Coakley has at least as much experience as I do, if not more. And I'll be looking forward to hearing from him. Kathleen, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And I think I've spoken enough on my own behalf. I know the harbor well. I know the conditions. The operating a sailboat, I have a unique set of circumstances that I have to deal with. And I also have a network of people that I've talked with about the environmental issues surrounding the dredging. People like Steve Swain. Learned a lot from him about the various options that could be brought to bear on, and I've brought him to our advisory board meetings. So that's what I bring to the table. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Kevin Coakley, are you there?
I am here.
And would you like to talk about wanting to be on the dredging committee and anything you might want to add?
Sure. As John said, I'm not in competition, and I've been in the harbor for as a captain licensed for over 20 years. And I've fished out of the harbor back in the late 70s. And we've watched the harbor through the ramp project when they did the last dredging, partial dredging, and how it affected both the recreational and the commercial. In commercials, not only fishing, it's the sailing industry, as well as the clamming boats and the grant owners. So I just want to be part of the collaborative of people that are there and work to improve the situation and do it with everybody that's involved, especially the harbor masters, because they know the harbor better pretty much than anybody. That's all.
Yeah. Helen has her hand up.
Yes, there's one thing that Mr. Wolf didn't mention, which weights his candidacy with me favorably. I've had a lot of experience with people being on committees that relate to other committees' work, and to have that be very useful. And having John, having been on the Marina Advisory Committee for years, really makes him very useful. But whoever we vote on tonight, I want to remind whoever doesn't get it. I mean, to have 3 good candidates apply for this is, you know, heaven. But whichever one of you doesn't get it, remember, you can participate in committee meetings with permission of the chair, of course, and can contribute a great deal, even if you're not actually on a task force committee, commission, whatever. And I've done that. Other people have done that. One of the most valuable people, in my estimation, for the Shellfish Committee, who's never been on it, is Fred Richard, who goes to a lot of meetings and has a huge amount of very valuable information. So I urge whichever one of you doesn't get appointed tonight to feel free to go and participate and, you know, help us out here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I notice I'm looking through all the people who are here, and I know Joe Aberdale's on the Marina Advisory Committee, and he has been a long time dredging committee. And, you know, as we all know, he just got voted on tonight. Joe, are you able to weigh in on this appointment?
I have checked on, I believe I have checked on the computer. Am I on?
Yes, you are. Yes.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I think both John and Kevin are qualified, certainly. I know them both. In looking at the candidates, I indicated that my choice would be for Kevin, nothing negative against John, but I know Kevin to have been around a very long time to do both pleasure and commercial boating. He is a power boater, so covers a great area out there and knows every aspect of the harbor. He's a teacher. I think he's got good communication skills, can work in a team. John has contributed well to the Marine Advisory Committee. My selection favorite at this point would be for Kevin. Again, nothing negative toward John, but I think he has a more global view with his experiences in covering the entire harbor and channel and out there.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, are we ready for a motion?
Okay, you ready, Janet?
Yes, except for I just put my paper away. But go ahead.
Okay, I move to appoint Kevin Coakley to the Dredging Task Force for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Is there a second? Okay, Mike.
Michael.
All in favor?
Wait, was there a second?
Yes.
Mike.
Thank you.
All in favor? All in favor?
Justina, I.
Michael, I.
Janet, I.
Helen, are you there?
Helen, nay.
And
Yeah, Kathleen, no.
Okay, so motion passes 3 yes, 2 against. So Kevin is our new on the dredging committee.
Kevin, I'll look forward to meeting you on the waterfront.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, John.
So since it's now close to 10 o'clock, not 10 o'clock, I'm going to suggest, because we have all been to a lot of meetings, we had a COVID update meeting this morning. Both Julie and Sarah have talked about it. I would like to actually postpone that unless people have a particular section of that. This will again come up next week, and that we move on to the select board reports.
Madam Chair, there are 2 items that did request action, the shellfish permits and the community block grants. The other
Okay.
ones, I know there's been a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm trying to read as I go. Okay, let's do the, yes, let's do the shellfish permits. Yeah, to sell the seasonal shellfish permits first.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I absolutely support the shellfish constable on this. Having heard in some detail about the enforcement issues involved and the fact that people that come through more quickly aren't as accustomed to the kind of social distancing and the way in which the community has been learning about how to live with the virus. In other words, when people come through and have a recreational permit, it's way more short-term than annual, and I support the shellfish constable on this. I don't think we should do that this year, even though it means that we will have less money.
Madam Chair, it's Kathleen. Can I weigh in?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I don't want to do this. I would, I think we're experiencing a very difficult summer here. People are here. Shellfishing is something that they can do. It's recreational. It puts them outside. If the constable has the staff and they can be monitored, I really don't want to stop doing this. I think that again, like Julian and Sarah said, it's going to be a muted summer. I know there's a lot of concern because of COVID-19, but this is precisely the kind of activity that we would like to see continue. So I'm not in support of, stopping the sales of recreational permits. I just think that when they are sold, that we have, guidelines and safety protocol issued with that, that privilege.
Okay, thank you. Michael and Justina, do you want to weigh in on this?
Let Justina go first.
I'm unmuting you, Justina. Hang on. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Having reviewed the Shellfish Constable's documentation, I think she lays out a clear case, but it's difficult for her department. And I know from work I've done in the past, the seasonal permits aren't as much as the rest of ours, but they are going to have the rest of the permits sold, but they'll pose disproportionate headache on Nancy's department, and I'm not in agreement that we will have a slowed down summer. We might not. We're supposed to have record heat. So I think that for the reasons laid out in Nancy's documentation, that it's going to be difficult for her department to enforce. Some years it's a COVID year, people won't be able to get a permit, shellfish permit, they're gonna have to deal with that.
Thank you. So I would say that I always like to support our shellfish constable and all the other department heads. I know that she's put a lot of thought into this. Are we ready for a motion?
May I add one more point, please?
Of course.
Yeah. The thing that hasn't been raised is when there's enforcement on the flats and recreation. I agree with Kathleen, it's a nice thing to do, but right now, this summer, we have to protect people. We have to keep things safe. And enforcement of people, recreational fishers, I mean, shellfishing people that have those permits, requires staff to get up close and personal in a way. And I just don't want to add to the fact that they have to patrol for Vibrio anyway. I just don't want to add to their lack of protection. I'm thinking about the staff now, and that's the reason I don't think we should allow it just this summer. It's unfortunate, but there's so many things that are not going to be happening in the same way. And there are a lot of things to do outdoors without that.
Would you or anyone else like to make a motion?
I just have a quick comment.
Okay, Mike.
So these are seasonal permits to non-residents, correct? Is that what it is?
No.
I'm just wondering, if there's already recreational shellfishing going on, to what extent does that add, and does the department have someone to manage recreational shellfishing as it stands? So in other words, is there already going to be someone there to do this enforcement? And I don't really like the idea of stopping something that there's so, I don't know what it's like enforcing there, so I'm not trying to pretend that I do. But it just seems to
Can you
me
turn
that
that down?
there's enough space, and if there's already somebody there, it's all in one location that it takes place. It seems like there's enough space for that to function. But you know, I just wanted to ask, I guess I'm asking Nancy.
Okay, so first of all, we would have to get rid of the entire category of seasonal permits. So that means we would not sell resident seasonal permits either. It's a $20 price difference. It's $40 for a seasonal pass for 4 months, and it's $60 for an annual pass. So any resident could buy for an extra $20 an annual pass. The non-resident pass is $85 for 4 months or $210 for the year.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll lose some people and we won't. I mean, I think I already have some people who are interested in buying the $210 if this goes through tonight. But I think, you know, the point of this is to reduce the amount of people at Indian Neck, if possible, because it's only on Wednesdays and Sundays, and it's only Indian Neck that is open. So, you know, recreational shell fishermen only have that one place to go, and it can get quite busy because typically people all seem to come at the same time, you know, more. So, you know, we've had 40, 80, 100 people at a time in a small area. It was hard even for Drew, who was dedicated there for the past 2 years. It's been hard for him sometimes to keep up with everybody. Okay, you don't check everybody every time, but we had originally put in to have extra help there. And because of the budget stuff and COVID, okay, you know, we're going to make do as we have in the past. I just think that it actually could be hard on big weekends, on Sundays, you know, to manage that many people. It would reduce, it was about 114 non-residents, and I think it was 57 residents. So, you know, we're not going to lose, it's about 200 people. And, you know, so maybe we'll reduce it by 100, but we're probably going to be reducing it on, you know, weekends and when it gets really busy. And
Sure.
it's a way for us to try and do all that we have on our plates while making sure that we're keeping ourselves safe out there.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought it was completely cutting off access. They can buy an annual permit, is what you're saying.
That's correct.
Okay, that changes it. I just thought, I didn't realize that we had annual permits for non-residents. I thought it was all seasonal. I don't know.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So, yeah, I'm
Okay.
ready to vote on this whenever.
Would you like to make a motion, Mike or Kathleen?
I move not to sell I move not to sell seasonal recreational shellfish permits for 2020.
Helen, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Michael, aye.
Justina, I.
And Janet, aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. And now we'll move on to the, what's it called? The Community Development Block Grant COVID funds. Mr. Hort, are you there? To explain this, yeah.
I am here, yes. This
Good
is
evening.
this is a grant application that we're doing. Truro is the lead participant. They've invited us to be a part of this. It isn't a cost to the town. It will have benefits to the town. The two programs are the Small Business Forgivable Loan and Micro Enterprise Forgivable Loans, and the Mortgage and/or Rental Assistance. So all we have to do is say that, yes, we're interested in participating, and we will then be eligible for grants to people in town.
Sounds wonderful. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to participate in the Regional CDBG COVID-19 grant application, and to authorize the select board chair, yourself, Madam Chair, and the town administrator to sign such application.
Helen, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Christina, I.
Michael, aye.
And Janet, I. Thank you. So, Mr. Hort, while you're there, is there anything else besides moving on? And is it okay with you that we postpone those other COVID-19 updates?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we would now go on to, under business is dredging update, but that came about kind of as a mistake because really when Courtney was doing the agenda, I just meant to do the dredging task force update and I just put dredging update. So that's off the table. So are there any select board reports?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
I've got my brains with me a little more than I did last time. I went to the day-long Herring River technical team meeting. I went to the Herring River stakeholders meeting. And I attended something which Suzanne Grout Thomas described as Mike's baby. I happen to know that Mike's baby is Violet, but thank you, Mike, for kind of shepherding this staff group, the community needs group that meets on Friday mornings. I hadn't been to one of their meetings. And, you know, it's not an open meeting in the sense that, you know, I showed up, there was no other select board member there by chance, but I learned a lot at it. And I have to say that I understand why they want to be efficient, and, you know, having a lot of people participating would make it less so. It's basically staff talking with each other and giving each other updates. But even though I've been going to so many COVID meetings, guess what? I learned stuff. And I'm just reporting that they're very valuable, and it's very good in this time for people to be communicating around that one topic.
Helen, they're open to the public every other week too.
Yeah, well, I went on an off week.
Well, actually, that's changing, Mike. You missed the last
Yeah,
meeting.
I missed the last meeting.
So it's actually changing, and we
Okay.
can update you that, and the website's updated.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
But it would be good for the rest of the board to be able to access that information, even if it was just a recording, because I learned things. So anyway, that's my report. Thank you.
Anyone else with a select board report? So moving on, our shellfish constable wants to say something, clarify something from before. Nancy?
Let me unmute her.
So I was trying, this is regarding the grant lottery, and I was trying hard to make it as uninfluenced as possible. And so I changed the order of the list, and I just put it in reverse order. And that's the list that Janet and I had and went off of. But it's been brought to my attention that there was a publicly produced document that was online.
Yeah.
The rest of you all were looking at.
Yeah.
And that everybody thought that the number 7 that was drawn was somebody else. And I feel horribly about this. It was done with my best of intentions, but I believe that in the essence of transparency and the fact that it was a publicly published document, that, you know, my suggestion would be to go with the 7 that was on that list. Unless you guys feel differently, but I did not think that through. I was just trying to make it as kind of uninfluenced. I just didn't want any impression on the numbers to have stayed in somebody's head. But the ballot box really, you know, that it's blind, and the ballot box really does take care of that. So There was a publicly published document online and people thought that it was number 7 on that, including Kathleen, if I'm not mistaken.
Madam Chair, if I may, I agree. I was very taken aback. We all had this document in our hands. We were looking at a number 7 and a different name. And the fact that you and Nancy had another sheet just doesn't seem right to me. Nor the individual that had that document as well. So I agree, the ballot box is blind and there was no reason to have a second sheet of paper with a different list of numbers. The ballot box is blind.
So if I can, from my point of view, is the public list of names was not numbered. They were in a certain order, but they were not numbered. And since I'm the one officially drawing the name, I had an officially numbered list. It was like 1 so-and-so, 2 so-and-so. So it doesn't matter to me, but I would say that the list I had was the official list. But what do you want to do, Nancy?
Madam Chair?
Does Nancy want to say anything first?
No, I want to listen.
I'm going to recuse again from this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I, at no point seeing the list, thought I had no assumption as to how they would be numbered. I had hoped that the numbering would be something that wouldn't resemble what was on the list, so that there would be no obvious preference in the presentation of that line of names. I feel that Nancy did exactly the right thing. She could have assigned any number to any name, not even in a reverse order, right? And the only thing that mattered would be that the person who drew the number out, right, would know exactly what number corresponded to what name. And that was the chair, and she drew it out, and she knew that. There was no monkey business. It was actually done more carefully even than it would have been, and more fairly than it would have been if those names had been numbered. Do you see what I mean? You had to arrange them on the page some way, but I was clear about it. I appreciated the fact that there were no numbers. And in any case, if people had assumptions, I actually asked the Shellfish Constable about it when we were talking about the other agenda item today. And I just asked her how the numbers were going to go. And when she told me, I said, oh, that's good. That's a good idea, because, the first person on the list, I'm Wilson, so I've always been at the end of the list alphabetically. So I appreciated what she did. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that both in the rigorous debate we had about one of the candidates, the grant lottery, and then in the scrupulous way, Nancy tried to make the voting process transparent and fair. And then Janet, of course, also. I think it was a great process, a piece of our town history, and it was nice to be part of it. And I think we can all feel good about what happened tonight.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that I'm always doing the right thing. I'm just trying my best.
That's clear, Nancy.
Oh, it's always new, isn't it? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll now go to town administrator's report. Any questions about the town administrator's report? I guess not. Topics for future discussion.
I have one, Madam Chair, Kathleen. I'd like to hopefully talk about the fuel tanks at the marina, get a time frame, a placement, access plan, and a detail of budgeting approval. This is a good time to be discussing it before the dredging takes place in the fall. Those tanks are at the end of their lifeline, and it's something it's been on my list. So if we could have that as an agenda item very soon. Anybody agree with me on that?
I think we've addressed it, but we can certainly update it. Because I know you've brought this up a number of times before, and we'll ask Will Sullivan to make a statement. Okay, any other future discussions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the first thing on my list, and Kathleen and I didn't talk about it. I want more than like a report. I want to know when it's going to start. It should have started over a year ago.
Exactly.
Wait, I'm not done.
Okay.
It's a burning issue. So yes, but the thing that I'd also like to have clarified is we have effectively clearly voted that there will be no use for events and so forth on town property through the rest of the year. That was a good discussion. It was a nice, clean vote. People can make plans. But I think we need to clarify, and it's been done kind of obliquely, that although we own town landings, what goes on the beaches at town landings, which is town property, has certain things that are permitted. They're not like events or weddings or fundraisers, and that we should have some public exchange about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is we own the property on which the building of Prez Hall exists. And when we made that vote, the garden and the surrounding land that is in that lot, which includes the memorial garden, are town property. And as far as I can make out from reading the motion, which I voted for, it means that Prez Hall has to be clear that they can't use that extended area for events. Or we need to do another vote that discusses that, whether or not we should do it for that one thing or not. I was contacted about it, and we're not talking about the building. We discussed that. We clarified it. I'm talking about the land around the building. So those are my three things that I'd like to have. Oh no, there's a fourth thing. If I finish up doing the homework on the liquor licensing regs that Kathleen brought to the table to have amended, could we take a look at that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put it on a future agenda, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that I feel is the most important future agenda is the town administrator decision, and that we don't put it behind anything else once we get the schedule for it, so that we don't. Thank you. I know I'm repeating myself there. Sorry. Thank you.
All right, anyone else for future discussion? Any comments on the correspondence report? Besides lots of correspondence, how about minutes? Can I have a motion to accept the May 12th, 2020 minutes
Guys?
amended?
Yeah, so that came, the ones for the EMT, joint EMT select board meeting, there were no amendments. But the others I sent today, and there were a few amendments. Did you all get them?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize for it being so late. Courtney got them to me in plenty of time right after the last meetings, and I'm not sick, nobody in my family is sick. It wasn't that, but other stuff had to come first. So I only did them today, and this beautiful day. I'm a martyr. So if you all got them, yeah, I mean, we can vote on them.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes of May 12th, 2020 as amended.
Second, Helen.
Okay, all in favor?
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Christina, I.
Michael, I.
And Janet, I. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2020 as amended.
Helen, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Christina, I.
Michael, I.
And Janet, I. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And now may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, Helen. Helen, I.
Kathleen, I.
Christina, I.
Michael, I.
And Janet, I. Thank you all. See you all soon. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay home. And
Thank you, Janet.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Janet.
So
Thank you, Wellfleet. Thank you, everybody.
for the people who were waiting for short-term rentals, those topics that were postponed from COVID-19 discussions will be taken up on Tuesday, June 2nd at 10 a.m. on that call.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.